Let's go ahead and call the work session to order, please. The first item on today's agenda is public comment on issues that are on the agenda. Does anyone wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll roll ahead. We have a docket to approve today. Councilmember Beard has moved that the docket be approved. Do I hear a second? A second from Councilmember James. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of approving the docket, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Councilmember Beard.
Beard?
Excuse me. McCord, I'm sorry.
I have a walk-on that is coming from law shortly to walk onto the docket, so I just wanted to know whenever that comes down to.
We can take those up during council reports.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have just received a list of people who wish to comment on issues that are on the agenda, so if there's no objection, we'll back up and follow up on that. It appears both are interested in addressing the lyric. And Sherry Maddock, there you are, Ms. Maddock. If you'd step to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes, and then Bob Vall, Mr. Vall. There you are. Thank you. Mr. Vall, if you come around, Mr. Vall, if you come around and be standing by, I'd appreciate it. All right, Ms. Maddock.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to address the mayor and council about the critical matter of the lyrics renovation. My name is Sherry Maddock. I'm a resident of the East End. My family and I live at 262 East 4th Street. And until very recently, I served as the president of the Martin Luther King Neighborhood Association. Today, however, I speak to you as a representative of the Legacy Center at Bluegrass Community Foundation. I work for the Legacy Center as the East End Project Liaison. Steve Austin, the director of the Legacy Center, sends his regrets as he had a previous engagement. He and David Cozart are in Louisville at the moment advancing the cause of the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden. Working together with Council Representative James and the Lyric Task Force, the Legacy Center is partnering to move forward with the fundraising, marketing, and community engagement plan for the Lyric. We are committed to the future success of the Lyric Theater. Our support role with the Lyric will mirror our ongoing participation of organizing and fundraising for the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden. The Legacy Center activity in the East End was born out of the citywide citizen engagement process that was initiated by LFUCG and the Knight Foundation back in 2007. One of the two legacy projects to rise to the top of that effort as a priority across this city is the revitalization of the East End, specifically the 3rd Street corridor between Elm Tree Lane and Midland Avenue. City Council gave the invitation for input, and citizens voiced their preferences. And from that, we hold firmly that the Lyric will serve as a major anchor to the revitalization efforts on East 3rd. And the Lyric is a significant place for both the past and the future for residents in the East End and across the city of Lexington. During the past 18 months, the Legacy Center has been involved in multiple projects in the East End. We helped Ed Holmes with the creation of the East End Small Area Plan. At this time, my job as community liaison is to work alongside the East End community to implement the 10 priorities that were developed out of that small area plan. The Legacy Center is working closely with the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden Board to fundraise for the Memorial Park, and we will complete the East End banner project by the end of this summer. Speaking on behalf of Steve Austin and the Legacy Center, we strongly urge you to vote in favor of the restoration of the Lyric. It is, we contend, a milestone project in the ongoing revitalization of this key downtown area. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Mr. Vaughn, if you will come forward, you'll have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I just found out I was going to speak, so I'm going to try to make a couple of points that relates to the lyric. I am a member of Christ Church Cathedral, and Christ Church Cathedral is the owner of the Third and Elm Tree Lane Old Episcopal Burying Ground, also the lot that now contains the London Farrell Community Garden. I've been the volunteer coordinator of that operation for the last several years. It has afforded me a great opportunity to become familiar with that neighborhood and to create projects that draw the neighbors of that neighborhood into a commonality. There's a great connectiveness that has been energized over the last few years. And one of the things that I did during this time was to visit a few of the neighborhood association meetings, including the William Wells Brown. And I have a lasting memory from the William Wells Brown visit that makes me and prompted me to speak today, and that is the passion I saw with regard to the restoration of the Lyric Theater. I've not witnessed much of that, and I've had many years of volunteer work on the Civil Service Commission, the Human Rights Commission in Lexington, but I haven't seen as much coordinated passion and desire for something to be done in the revitalization of the Lyric Theater. I can tell you from having spent the last 20 years in restoration of the Old Episcopal Burying Ground, Christ Church has a vested interest in this. I, as a member and as the coordinator of the burying ground, have a vested interest in it. But I don't think it even comes close to the passion of those who have historically been connected to the active Lyric Theater. I think this is one of the finest opportunities for Lexington to step up and fulfill its commitment that it has previously made to the restoration of the Lyric Theater. I think it would be a misfortune to debate this much further than a yay on your part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughn. All right. Let me ask you to refrain from applause whenever someone speaks today. We've had a pretty effective rule of keeping that to a minimum, and it seems to work pretty well. I understand everybody feels passionately about the issues, but if you could avoid that, I think it will permit us to move along a little more rapidly today. We have approved the docket, so that brings us down to the summary that we have for approval. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I have a motion from Councilmember Gordon and a second from Councilmember Ellinger to approve the summary. Any discussion? All in favor, then, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have some budget amendments to consider. Is there a motion to approve? Councilmember Stinnett has moved to approve the budget amendments. Councilmember Myers has seconded that motion. Any discussion? All in favor, then, say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries. The new business items are next. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Move approval.
I have a motion by Councilmember Gordon and a second by Councilmember Blues. Any discussion? Then we'll vote. Those, Councilmember Lawless. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on a matter on the agenda? All right. Then those in favor of approving the new business items, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Takes us down to the presentations for today. We have 3. So let's get started with the Corridors Committee presentation. Dr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor, and greetings to the council. I'm just sitting there trying to add up how many council meetings I may have attended in this chamber, and I've got it down to 1,080. So this makes 1,081 or so, but this may be the last. The Carters Committee has a presentation to give to you, and Mr. Mark Yannick and Mr. Mark Arnold, principals with M2D, will give you the basic information. The Carters Committee has 2 grants, one for Versailles Road and one for Newtown Pike, as well as one for the interchange at Alexandria and Old Frankfort Pike, which will be heavily traveled roads for the World Equestrian Games. That's what we're here to talk to you today about. What I want to do is review with you the council committee, Carter's committee, that should be, Carter's committee reorganization, current projects in the construction phase, and ongoing projects. The Carter's committee was started in 1988, conjunction with the mayor and the council at that time. Primarily, it was advocated by the council, and it has consisted of members of the council, interested parties from the garden clubs and other groups in town, as well as members of the various departments from the city and the state. It has met regularly, about 10 times per year, and advocated various projects which improve the aesthetics of our major roads with trees and other improvements. Because this has been an ad hoc committee through the years, some members of the council thought that it should be codified, and I would agree with that. I've been serving as holdover chairman as Don Blevins was scheduled to be the chairman, but of course he flew the coop down the street to the county clerk's office, and it could not function. And since I was the only remaining person who had attended the meetings during the last several years, I was selected to be the interim chairman. The purpose of this ordinance is to create a better definition of the Carters Committee, or commission as it will be called, and to define the membership, who votes, who doesn't, and other, as well as their purpose and mission. I have participated in the meetings where this was drafted, and I think you got a copy of it yesterday. And Dr. Tom Blues will address this during his during his council report. I support this reorganization in all of its elements that have been presented. The projects we have underway, the Old Frankfort Alexandria Gateway is designed to become a roundabout. Since people have done well out of Wellington Way, and I don't believe they've learned how to do that now, the State Highway Department wants to put a roundabout there. We had $125,000 that had been appropriated from transportation enhancement to do the stone wall on Newtown Pike. However, when the Highway Department rebuilt Newtown Pike, they did the stone wall, so they didn't need the money. And they wanted us to transfer that to putting a stone wall in the roundabout as a decorative item on the southwest corner, which will be done. We also have a grant that is working on Versailles Road and on Newtown Pike, and you'll hear about that from Mr. Yannick. And I think now I'll turn it over to Mr. Yannick or Mark Arnold, and they can give you the details of these 2 projects, and we'll be here for questions if any should occur.
Thank you. I'm Mark Arnold. I'm a landscape architect with M2D Design Group here in Lexington. We've worked a little bit on all 3 of these projects, and I'd point out that all 3 of them have been partially or fully funded by transportation enhancement grants. So that's been a real boost for the city. We do have 2 currently that are underway right now. One has been bid and will be under construction as soon as planting season begins, hopefully in September or October. The second project is in the design phase, and we anticipate it bidding either this fall or early spring, both to be ready for the World Equestrian Games. A third project that Dr. Stevens alluded to is the roundabout or the Gateway project here at Alexandria and Old Frankfort. Again, we assisted Lyle Ayton. I think many of you all are familiar with Lyle and his work here with the council. We assisted him with the design of this project, and it's essentially a gateway to the city of Lexington and also a gateway to the pristine horse farm to the west of Lexington. It's a roundabout that will feature an equine sculpture, 1.5 or 2 times scale in the center of the roundabout with additional landscaping. And also flower beds and plantings. Stone walls are currently being moved back out of that area and will be on the, featured along the sides. Whoops, I skipped ahead too quick. Another project we've been working on is just generally enhancements of landscaping along Versailles Road. This is really, essentially begins at the airport with a new entry wall, the mural wall along Versailles Road, and also the area at New Circle Road moving in towards Alexandria Drive to become a landscape gateway for the city. The 2 areas that are involved, or actually 3 areas that are involved in this grant, are one directly at the New Circle Road interchange. That would be Area 1 on the screen. There'll be some landscape enhancements in that area. The second area would be at Alexandria Drive at the intersection there at Versailles Road. And the third area would be at the viaduct coming into the community right at downtown. I'll skip ahead. You can kind of see an existing aerial of both of those features. There's the Pine Street Viaduct on the bottom. There's the New Circle Road Gateway at the top. And this is the Alexandria edge. What we have planned at New Circle Road is generally an extension of sort of a pristine or a bucolic landscape elements, adding flowering trees, masses of flowers and shade trees in the intersection or in the cloverleaf areas on 2 sides to serve as a gateway as you come into the city and also to serve as sort of a planting as you exit the city. Generated a sort of a before and after image. This is as you're moving in towards city from the airport side. This would be the right-hand side of the road. It's an existing tree stand. And what we've actually are planning, there we go, would be the development of some horse farm fence. As you can see, some additional trees, flowering trees in the background, and then masses of flowers in the front. Moving from that area towards Alexandria, we're taking advantage of the medians there. We still have green medians in this location, and we're putting sort of a dynamic landscape planning within those medians, and then reinforcing the edges with some additional trees. There's a lot of nice fence there and a lot of nice mature trees. We're adding some flowering trees to that area, again, to reinforce the existing landscape. And more of the same as you proceed towards the Alexandria intersection. This is just as you get to Alexandria. Again, we're working with those large existing green islands that already exist, that are already there. It's kind of hard to see in this photo, but adding some mature trees and screening for the parking areas. For the bridge, there's not a lot of landscaping you can physically put on the bridge, so we've combined essentially adding some trees at the front and the back of the bridge, and then looking at some banner opportunities for the bridge. And in this case, the banners would hang off the existing lights and would be of horse farm silk colors. Move on to Newtown, but I'd point out that, again, that project has been bid, it's been awarded. We have a contractor on Versailles Road project currently, and the work will begin as soon as, again, July's not the right time to plant trees. We need to wait until September or October. The work will begin at that point.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes, sir.
We can't hear you when you're turned away from the microphone,
Okay.
so if you could speak into the microphone, it would be helpful.
Yes, sir. So moving on, this is Newtown Pike project. We are currently working with the neighbors along Newtown Pike and the city. We have a transportation enhancement budget of $260,000 for the project, and it is in the design phase. And we've developed quite a few ideas, and we've begun showing some of the landscape ideas to the local neighbors and neighborhood associations. We do have some existing medians as you come into the Main Street Gateway. We felt like this was an area that was a fairly readily accessible. We would be able to bring trees into the area and start to plant and make a pretty strong impact at this point. So the proposal calls for landscaping the medians, again with vegetation, flower masses, adding mature trees along the edges of the road and adding some additional vegetation and looking at banner opportunities. One of the things that we're also working on is trying to strengthen our connection to the future BCTC campus along this area. As you can see, public sidewalks suffer in this area a little bit, so we're beginning to look at what we could do now to add some vegetation as a first step, looking at opportunities to put some trees and some screening shrubs in, but then as a long-term step, looking at some enhancements to the entire corridor, developing some new walkways, widening those walkways if possible, and trying to provide a more pedestrian-friendly access along this area. There are some nice art opportunities at this point, and certainly it's the corridors where we can enhance that with vegetation and try to help those spaces and create a little more dynamic quality to those existing spaces we're going to. There's also some talk about a potential mural on the back wall there that would enhance that experience. We can get this to run, kind of taking a 3D look. Can I flip back? Can we run that animation at this point? Here we go. We've developed the drive-through experience for this end of Newtown Pike in an animation that shows you kind of what we're hoping to get it with a drive-by. Again, we're adding trees on both sides of the road, looking at flowering trees in the medians, looking at new planting opportunities in the medians. So we'll let this run through. We try to put you behind the wheel in this particular image so you can get a feel for what the experience would be like as a gateway. While this is running, I'd point out that there are other areas on Newtown Pike that we're looking at as well. This is obviously the gateway and what would be closest to Main Street, but we're moving down across from IBM or the Lexmark facility, looking at some strategic plantings where we've got some things that really could be benefited by additional landscaping. We're going to try to work additional plant material in, kind of strengthen that, the whole experience, literally from the highway all the way into downtown. And for some reason, our car turned very slowly. Maybe it's me backing out of the driveway here or something, but it'll pick back up. We were actually able to put this animation to YouTube and publish that and get some input from the local community directly on the computer. So it was kind of a nice tool to get feedback from the community while we're still in the design process. So we've got a couple of ongoing projects in the office that are a little smaller, not necessarily related to World Equestrian Games, but we're looking at Winchester Road enhancement and landscaping, and then also taking another look at Nicholasville Road. Those are the 5 projects that we've been involved in, and I would be happy to skip back if anyone has any questions or try to give you more detail.
Does that conclude your all's presentation?
Yes.
All right, very well. Councilmember James.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, over here. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. A question about the tree plantings. I'm a member of the tree board, and one of the things that makes us just a little bit shaky is anytime we see new tree plantings in right-of-ways and talking about maintenance. I didn't know how many of these were actually planted on private property versus, or in the yards versus in right-of-ways, and if you've talked about have you talked with our urban forester about how we plan to maintain those, and if we need to start looking at increasing the funding for our urban forestry to make that happen.
Well, Tim, the urban forester, has been a part of all of our conversations in selecting, as we begin now to select specific species. He's going to continue to be a part of that conversation. I know that for Newtown Pike, and Mark Yannick could jump in and clarify, we're really attempting to put most of the planting in the right-of-way and limit the amount of plantings that are outside of the right-of-way. In other projects, for example, earlier Versailles Road projects, we had no right-of-way to work with, so we actually went door to door, essentially, and added trees to the corridor by speaking directly with the public. For this portion of Versailles Road, the work that you saw here today, again, most of that we're trying to keep in public right-of-way. So whether we need to refund for additional maintenance down the road, I think there's already a fair amount of maintenance that's done on all of the corridors. I would encourage us to do so. If we want our corridors to look beautiful, we need to back up the landscape installation with funding, with future maintenance funding.
Okay. I would just look for that to come from our urban forester as you move this plan forward, to be sure that he's clarifying with, his director, commissioner, the mayor, the council, what increased funding needs to happen in order to maintain these trees, because I don't want them to be a public safety hazard.
It's been a part of all of our conversations, so we're working pretty closely with it.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stinnett indicated he couldn't log into the system here, so Councilmember Stinnett and Councilmember Gort.
Thank you, Mayor. Just had a question on the ongoing projects. I didn't see North Broadway on there. Nothing's going to be done or looked at on North Broadway, because that is probably going to be the next biggest access to downtown besides Newtown Pike, and there's several issues along North Broadway.
I think North Broadway is currently under study. Now, I can't speak for the whole Corridors Committee. It wasn't one of the projects that they asked me to feature here today based on the World Equestrian Games, but it is currently being studied as a corridor project.
Is there anyone else I can comment on that? Because I would think that that's probably the second major route into downtown from the horse park, or we utilize when Newtown is backed up. Is there not anyone?
I don't know the time.
The other thing, did they ask you to look at the railroad overpasses and improving what they look like? Because, again, North Broadway, another example of the condition of those railroad, what they look like coming into our city. I know those are big issues for several people around the city.
I don't believe there's any significant work being done on that right now. We did talk to the Corman Railroad Company who owns that overpass, and Mr. Corman would be very happy if we painted it for him, but I told him I thought we looked into that, and it's their responsibility, the railroad.
When was the last time we spoke with Mr. Corman?
About 6 months ago.
Oh, maybe we need to have those conversations again, because we're 451 days away. And
I think that if we're going to get it painted, that's probably necessary, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Gort.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your presentation. I have a question, but first a comment that you can't do anything about. But as you drove us along Newtown Pike, it occurred to me that, and this is more on the engineering of the road side, that given that traffic congestion is probably our number one or number two issue all the time, that we've probably missed a good opportunity by not going under the railroad crossing there like we did on Broadway. And that's more someone else's question. But on your presentation, that the packet that we received, ongoing projects, you've listed the revised Winchester Road ordinance and review of the old ordinance. And does that involve looking at the viewshed study that was done several years ago and how to integrate that into policy or integrate it into planning? And how will you be using that? Is that one of your projects?
Actually, it's not one of my specific projects, but I will get the answer for you. Morgan McElwain, one of my partners, worked on that project when he was with a previous firm, so he's very familiar with the project, and I can find out and get that information to you. I do know that they'll be looking at all old materials, old plans, old master plans and ordinances as they review the project and bring it up to date.
I'm very happy to hear that, because I know in this particular instance, quite a bit of money was spent to study the Winchester Road corridor and come out with the view shed plan, and it just occurred to me that we've put a lot into that corridor already, and we should integrate that into whatever we're going to do.
It's my understanding that our work has been a continuation of an effort that was 3 or 4 years old, and not a revisiting, but just continuing the effort. So we're moving actually on down the corridor, basically essentially extending the master plan closer and closer to downtown, which was our goal here, to move it towards the heart of the city.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to the very first part of your presentation concerning the Alexandria Drive, Old Frankfurt Pike roundabout, is there? I couldn't tell from the artist's drawing. Is there anything in the middle of the roundabout, any kind of structure or?
What's proposed right now in the very center of the roundabout, and it was hard to see on that graphic, is a round stone retaining wall that lifts up several feet. It berms up, so it becomes sort of higher than eye level. And then in the center of that is a large sculpture. And if you kind of see that center dot there, that's actually berming up, and then there's a low wall, and then within that planting zone is a freestanding equine sculpture, which is, again, 1.5 to 2 times larger than life. So it's...
Well, that's good news and bad news. It would be very attractive. I'm looking at the trees and then looking at that centerpiece, and I'm wondering, anybody that's trying to navigate that, are they going to be able to sight the automobiles properly? If it's anything like the Reynolds Road, Wellington, they whip around there pretty fast, and if you can't get a good bead on them when they're 180 degrees from you, and you have to wait until they're somewhere between 90 and 180, it could be dangerous.
That's correct. And before any final plans are actually developed, we'll be looking with the traffic engineers and other engineers to make sure that our sight distances are appropriate, that for the design speed of the turns, that we're going to have great visibility across there. It may modify slightly some of the plans, but that's certainly one of the first steps that we would typically take.
It seems to work well in Europe. For some reason, it hasn't necessarily, for some people anyway, worked well on Reynolds Road, and I would hate to have a situation where we can't do more of these in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Henson.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, thank you for coming. I'm excited that this has finally gotten to this point with the Purcell's Road corridor, because it's been several years since we first met and looked at the enhancements, and we couldn't do everything we wanted, but this is a very good start. And I just have one quick question, and I can't remember at the meetings I was at previously, but with the planting of the trees and the hedge on between Mason Headley, Parker's Mill area, that would be on private property, correct?
In some areas, we've had to look at each piece of the corridor kind of differently. In some areas, we do have right-of-way that we can work on. As we move down, say, from Alexandria towards New Circle, we have kind of a shared commitment there. We do have right-of-way that we can work with, but there might be some areas where we would want to use it with the shrubs planting for screening of parking areas. Could potentially be on private property. Mark, do you know specifically on Versailles Road between Alexandria and Newtown or New Circle Crossing, the plantings that we showed? Do you know specifically? They're all okay. Those are all on state right of way.
Okay. I was just wondering about the maintenance of those hedges and that they would be properly maintained and. Okay.
2 years ago, we did have a planting from Alexandria moving towards Red Mile. Had a fairly large planting, and every one of those plants was put on private property. We went door to door and solicited homeowners and property owners that would be willing to put the plants in and then maintain them.
Well, thank you very much for your work, and I love the flags.
Thank you. Councilmember Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to get a little bit of information on the roundabout at Alexandria and Old Frankfort Pike for the new gateway. Have some of the horsemen that live out that corridor made contributions or helped in setting up the roundabout? Do you have any information about that?
Again, Lyle Layton has been the senior landscape architect on the project, and we've just assisted him. I think he's made contacts with several horse farm owners, and I understand that there are others involved as well. Libby Jones, other folks of that nature. So
I know Dr. Stevens had stepped up. Maybe he has some information there.
Excuse me. We've met with the people who live along there. They call it the Corridors Committee of the Old Frankfort Pike. It's not part of the Corridors Committee we're talking about today, but they have pledged to pay for the statue and all the other emoluments that the state doesn't put in. The only obligation of the Urban County government was that grant that was created some years ago. It'll be spent on the stone fence. So they're going to do a lot.
Okay. Do you know, the two people I heard were perhaps Governor Brenton Jones was involved and Tracy Farmer. Were they the drivers, or was there a lot of people?
Don Ball has been the major person behind it.
Okay. All right. You might stay up there, Dr. Stevens, just in case one of you may. I was just curious about the total cost to do all this landscaping, trees, and all that were put into this particular proposal today. Do you have a budget on that yet, or
For the roundabout, you mean?
no, sir? For all the trees and all the other landscaping.
Well, the budgets for the Versailles Road and the Newtown Pike are both about $250,000, and the stone wall is $125,000 on the roundabout.
And the source of those funds?
Transportation enhancement grants.
Okay. All right. I think that's good. Thank you all very much.
The Corridors Committee did want to thank the council for putting in the mayor for giving to the committee $90,000 for next year, so that'll help a lot.
Councilmember Feigl.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask, is this mic on? Yeah. I happen to drive this route pretty frequently, and I know that on this diagram of the roundabout, that's what I'm looking at, on Old Frankfort Pike, there's an old stone wall out there. It's in pretty bad shape. But is that going to be restored, or is that going to be removed?
It's my understanding that the project for the right-of-way acquisition to develop the roundabout has already been let by the city as a project. That project included the relocation of the stone wall.
Okay.
So I think that's where we...
So
Yes, the state is going to put that stone wall back, the one on the northwest corner. The one we've been talking about goes on Three Chimneys Farm, who now own the one on the southwest corner, and it'll be along there. And it'll be on their property, and they've agreed to maintain it.
And I guess the city just bought this other corner where we're going to put the recycling facility.
I missed too many meetings of the council to know what happened there.
Let me speak to that issue just a little bit. We acquired a portion of that property, but not the corner piece. Not the corner piece.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I moved back to Lexington, I lived out toward Midway on US 62, and I've driven Old Frankfort Pike more times than I can possibly count. This is one of the really extremely dangerous intersections in Lexington because you can't really, there's just terrible visibility there. Many, many accidents have been there. I've had family members that have accidents there. And so I'm just very, very pleased that a lot of thought is going into trying to alleviate this very dangerous intersection and perhaps provide some interest and beauty in our city and have something that's unique here. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lawless.
Thank you. So the Versailles Road Corridor project is currently going on, and
That's correct. It's bid, we have a contractor on board, we have an accepted bid, and it's moving forward, and I suspect trees will be planted as soon as the weather breaks in the fall.
I think that's really fabulous because it certainly needs it. Will there be road closures for that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And what about the Alexandria and Old Frankfurt Gateway? Again, it looks beautiful, and thank you for all your work on it, but do you know if there'll be road closures with that?
I couldn't begin to guess. I wouldn't be sure about that. Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Does any other member of the council have questions? Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Dr. Stevens, appreciate you being here today. The next presentation on today's agenda is the Lyric presentation, and Ms. Raybould will step to the podium, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us back today to talk about the Lyric Theater project. Before we get started today, I just wanted to say a special thanks to all of the people who are here today who've come to support the Lyric, especially those who have been involved much, much longer than I have over the past 20 years, including the Lyric Theater Task Force members. To give a little perspective of why we're here today, I think you will recall that after AMS, the professional consultants that we hired to develop a business plan, after they gave their presentation, we still had some questions about how the Lyric would operate, where the money would come from, and additional questions about programming. So the Vice Mayor appointed a work group to take AMS's report and make it better, essentially. And so the members of that work group include Dr. Everett McCorvey, who's here today, Juanita Betts-Peterson, who's also the chair of the Lyric Theater Task Force, Gene Woods from St. Joe, who is unable to be here today but wanted me to make sure you all know he's very supportive of the project, Jim Clark from LexArts, Councilmember Andrea James, Councilmember Ed Lane, and then two other people who participated but were not official members of the work group were Joan Brannon, I just completely lost it, and Charlie Boland. So thanks to all of them. What I want to do today is not go over in detail all 14 of the points that the Vice Mayor asked our group to do, because hopefully you have found the answers to those in the information you received last Thursday. But I do want to focus on the mission of the Lyric, the programming and the partnerships, the operating costs that will be required each year, the capital cost, and then the management overview. So I ask now that you join me in imagining the possibilities for the Lyric Theater into the future. I can figure out how to get this thing to work. I was a political science major, not a technology major. I apologize. The mission of the Lyric is very clear. The mission of the Lyric Theater and Cultural Arts Center is to preserve, promote, present, and celebrate diverse cultures with special emphasis on African American cultural heritage through artistic presentations of the highest quality, educational programming and outreach, film, and opportunities for community inclusion. And you may note that the name of the center has changed slightly from the Lyric Theater to the Lyric Theater and Cultural Arts Center. We collectively made this decision because we felt that it better informed the programming that would be possible at the Lyric. The Lyric is much more than just a theater. The vision for the Lyric is much broader than this, but a vision statement is the Lyric will uplift and inspire the community by being a leading American arts and cultural center informed by the African American experience and inspired predominantly by the stories of Lexington's African Americans. The programming approach, I believe we've talked about before, but what I want to do over the next few slides is kind of help us all visualize what it will really look like. Of course, it will be inspired by the mission, and it will be centered around the theme of telling our stories, the stories of African Americans within Lexington, around the country, and throughout the world, and how their stories tie into everyone else's stories, especially as it relates to making Lexington's collective story. The center was designed on purpose with a three-pronged approach. A performance theater with 558 seats, a gallery space, which you have heard referred to in the past as a museum, and also a multi-purpose space that will allow for performances and rehearsals, but also allow the community to use it for wedding receptions, family reunions, neighborhood associations. Businesses can use it for meetings or so forth. But the general idea of the concept for programming is that the events that are happening, the exhibits that are happening in the gallery will help inform what happens on the stage in the theater. And I want to read this really quickly because I think it's important. By telling the stories of African Americans in this community, we will tell the complete tale of the city. By telling the stories of African Americans in general, we may be able to rediscover the strong sense of community that has kept the stories alive. By experiencing firsthand the programming and educational opportunities envisioned for the Lyric, many more people of all races and ethnicities will be able to say the Lyric is part of their story too. So what will Lyric programming really look like and how will it work? In your, council members, in your report, I gave you several examples. In this presentation, I'll give you two. The first is a jazz example. Let's imagine that the gallery is featuring one of the traveling exhibits that is available from the Smithsonian or elsewhere. And this exhibit features African Americans, musical history of African Americans, alongside of the history of the Lyric Theater, especially with the performers that performed at the Lyric. The theater space at the same time would feature a jazz series, and one of the artists we could invite to perform would be the Preservation Hall Jazz Band out of New Orleans. If you have not heard them before, you certainly need to. If you haven't seen them live, you definitely need to, and if you want to borrow my personal CD, you can. The multi-purpose space can be used for musical classes for adults and for children. It can be used during the day and in evenings. And then a film series on the role of jazz produced by Jazz at the Lincoln Center is also available, and that can be used both for school children and for adults as well. And that's just a very brief example of how the gallery space works with the theater space. Another example is a dance example. There's an exhibit, a Smithsonian exhibit called The Dancer Within, and it shows lots of different images of various types of dance, much of them African American inspired, and there's text and audio involved with that exhibit. At the same time that exhibit would be in the gallery space, the theater space would be used to feature local and national dancers, including what we see here on the screen. This is a group called the Students of the Asphalt Jungle. They're out of Birmingham, Alabama, and our own Jim Clark actually knows some of them. And then the multi-purpose space could be used, of course, for dance classes. And the quote at the bottom here is from the Smithsonian. I think it's important. Of special interest to museums, university galleries, and performing arts centers, the dancer within offers exciting opportunities to reach new visitors, solidify special audiences, and form creative programming partnerships with local arts organizations. That's exactly what we're trying to do here with the Lyric. By having the gallery space, it allows us to broaden what the theater can do, and it allows us to expand our partnership abilities and do more education. We have lots of potential for partners, and I'm going to have Jim Clark come up here and run through these kind of quickly. There's performing arts partners, fine arts partners, local partners such as Lex Arts. We really appreciate the time and effort Jim, on behalf of Lex Arts, has given this project. Certainly the universities, Dr. McCorvey has already participated very much. And one area that we have not explored but we would like to, I didn't write it properly up here, but it's an Artist in Residence program. Artists can come and locate at the Lyric, and part of the program is that they have to do so many seminars or trainings with the community. So now I'll have Jim Clark take over briefly. Okay.
I think there's lots of opportunities here for partnerships with other nonprofit arts organizations across the country. And the core thinking there is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. 651 Arts, based in Brooklyn, is dedicated to performance based on the African diaspora, which interjects an international component into that. It helps us understand how African arts and cultural heritage has informed European culture, Caribbean, and North American. Most recently, they did a dance performance that celebrated the work of 5 choreographers, and when you look at American choreography today, it is heavily influenced by African American choreographers. They gave this performance a few weeks ago in Brooklyn. I spoke to the woman who curated the program, and they're very excited about the concept of the Lyric and would like to come here and perhaps do a performance at the Opera House or the Downtown Arts Center to show what could be possible. The fine arts partnerships are with local and regional groups and national groups, Kentucky Folk Arts Center, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and the National Center of Afro-American Artists. And currently at the Kentucky Folk Arts Center is an incredible exhibition of a Lexington artist, LaVon Williams, and we recently have had discussions with them to bring that exhibit to the Lyric for its opening. Richard Hunt is a sculptor from Chicago who is internationally known and respected. He has been here to UK to lead master classes and workshops and has been a part of our Distinguished Speaker Series. Ed Hamilton is based in Louisville. He was one of the first featured exhibits at Arts Place when I arrived here and has been very influential in sculpture throughout America. Mildred Howard is an artist based in Oakland, California. She'll be coming here in September to work with us on community-based arts programming. And one of her main concepts that she's been exploring for 20 years is incorporating the stories of communities and individuals into public artwork. And Faith Greengold is another well-known artist out of Brooklyn who her work also deals with the particular stories of individuals and how that shapes community. The community engagement part of this looks at arts organizations and artists in particular that have woven themselves into a particular community. And of note, the Village of Arts and Humanities in Philadelphia is an incredible model of an entire, it's about 4 or 5 block area that in and of itself has become artwork. An artist from New York, Dawad Bey, is very well known for going into communities and creating photography work based on the essence and character of community. And Big Davis is just up the road in Dayton. He'll be coming down in September as well to work with some of our youth and developing projects that help them become engaged in public art and finding their voice within art.
I hate to rush through this, but we only have 15 minutes. So some of the issues such as parking and others might be covered in the question portion, but this is probably what you're most interested in is the numbers. On the top here, and this is in your packet as well, I believe on page 13, but the operating expenses for year one total about $447,000. The operating revenue is $315,000. That leaves us with a deficit of about $131,000. So the bottom portion of this chart, you will see how we anticipate making up that revenue and then some. We are needing a direct financial allocation in years 1 and 2 of $150,000 from Urban County government. We are hoping that Urban County government will take on the cost of occupancy like we do for many of our government-owned facilities. Then we're looking at memberships, either $25 or $50 for individuals, presenting sponsorships for all of the shows that we're planning on having. The difference between our business plan and AMS's business plan is we are focusing much more on the lyric presenting shows as opposed to relying on people renting our facility, especially in the beginning years. So we will be looking to corporate partners to present a show, much like they do for the Opera House for the Broadway series. In year one, we are not anticipating any grants. Based on expert opinions from the arts community, there are no or little agencies that will give grants in the first year to a beginning organization. And then we think that we can raise $100,000 in the first year, and there may be some possible naming opportunities for corporations for the gallery and other components. And that leaves us with a surplus of $470,000. That seems really high. But if you think about it, we may not be able to reach all of our assumptions, but it does give us some realistic padding to break even at least, and hopefully have some more for the end. The next important thing...
You have about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. This is the cost. The cost of construction, $5.5 million, plus all of the other things that are associated with construction. You will see in the first column it equals $6 million. That's what we're asking to be bonded. The next column under other costs include the additional equipment and furnishings that aren't included in the bond and parking needs. We believe we can make up that $225,000 other needs with the remaining balance we have from the Lyric Fund, and assuming that we only use half of construction contingency. And that makes a total project from 1993 of $7.2 million.
Councilmember Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we give them another 5 to 7 minutes to finish up their presentation.
Second.
Have a motion and second to suspend the rules for purposes of allowing 5 additional minutes for the presentation. Any discussion? All in favor of suspending the rules for 5 additional minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
I'll be happy to go back to those numbers during the questions. I'm sure there will be. I want to keep moving, though. The Lyric Board, and this is just a suggestion, but what we have suggested is a 15-member board appointed initially by the mayor with staggered terms, and there will certainly need to be professional expertise and community involvement on this. We'll be looking for people that have strong financial strengths, creative fundraising strengths, legal, accounting, marketing, and then the community at large. We will then create immediately a 501c3 organization that will assume the management of the Lyric Theater, and from then on, the board will be appointed by the board itself. This is much like how Partners for Youth was developed under Mayor Miller as a 501c3. There will also be the opportunity for Friends of the Lyric, much like Friends of any other organization you might be aware of, the Farmers Market. In order to be a friend, you would donate, we're suggesting $25, and those people will help be worker bees, if you will. Help with receptions, help work the concession stands if needed, help drive artists around them or pick them up at the airport. But it's a way of getting people involved who may not be on the official board. Parking is a very big deal, I know. We've heard Mr. Lane say many times for a facility this size, we need 150 parking spots. And guess what? We actually agree with him. We have spoken with some parking experts, and for a 550-seat theater, they estimate 150 parking spots. So we worked very hard to come up with these spots. I'm going to put up a board really fast. Where's my assistant? Has no longer come here. If you can, this one on the end, and just put it on the easel. Let me orient everyone. This is looking north. There's an easel on the bottom. The green is the Lyric Theater. The green with slash marks is the expansion. Directly north on Elm Tree, the yellow is a dedicated Lyric lot that will provide approximately 20 spots. If you move west on 3rd Street going towards the fire station, you'll see another yellow lot. That's also owned by Urban County government. It was used by the health department, and that will yield about 40 spots. If you see the purple shaded areas, that is owned, we own part of it, but it's really owned, most of it, by the University of Kentucky Health Clinic, and that's a shared use spot, resulting in about 46 more spots. And then if you look at the red lines running up and down between 3rd Street and 4th Street, as you know, Elm Tree has 2 lanes running both ways. And I met with traffic engineering, and we collectively agreed that we have 2 options. We can do evening off-peak parking on the farthest lanes. That would be 4:30 on, and on weekends, that's called off-peak parking. Or because the volume of traffic is so low in that area, we could actually take away a lane permanently, keep a bike lane there, and have permanent parking along that area. That would result in 50 parking spots. We cannot say that it's dedicated to the Lyric because it's street parking, but certainly with what's around there, there's not much to go to other than homes. It would definitely be used by the Lyric. There's also street parking along 3rd Street, another 8 spots there. Collectively, that's a little over 150 spots. If you move southward and see the blue areas, those are some areas that were under conversations with the owners and leasers to see if we can use those spots as well. May expand to a valet service if people don't want to walk that far, and there's certainly more on-street parking. And that completes my presentation. I also want to note that we do have Susan Hill here from Tate Hill Jacobs if there's any questions about the design or construction, and I'm happy to go back to any of the points I made, because I'm sure I forgot to make many of them.
Thank you. Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Mayor. Shay, I know you're behind there. You can't hide. If you remember the last time we visited the question of costs, there was a $2,900,000 number and some discussion about the complete fitting out of the Lyric Theater and the museum and community center area, with emphasis on things like soundboards and spotlights and movie theater cameras and some of the heavier cost items. And I had suggested that we get bids so we would actually know what those numbers were. Now, I don't know whether that has happened or not, but is there a number in there that represents all that? It doesn't look like there is, but maybe you can help me.
Well, there is. Several of the components for equipment were included in the actual bid, $5.5 million. There is some lighting and some sound. Let me tell you what's included in that. There's lighting instruments, drapes and rigging, and various other components in the 5.5 number. The other costs are reflected on the bottom of where it says capital costs. It says equipment and furnishings, $80,000. And then the remainder is equipment and furnishings not included in the bond, $50,000. And then community network, $20,000. So these are all very good numbers. There's one that really the only major component of equipment that the theater would need to operate is a digital projector. That's not included in the bid, and we have a price for that, and it's about $25,000. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. The other components of equipment are necessities, but they're the tables, the desk, the filing cabinets, the things that we can either find here from our surplus or find it elsewhere at better prices.
Well, that's a backward leap from $2,900,000.
Well, that's why I really regret that sheet was circulated around, because it was an estimate that was just an estimate. These are the hard numbers we have now. We've got a hard number for construction. We know what our other costs are the best we can, and we know how much we've spent to date.
Right.
So we're looking at a total from 1993 project of $7.2 million, not the $900 that was once envisioned.
So that's, you said 900, you mean 9 million?
9 million.
$9 million. Numbers.
Well, important number.
Very important numbers.
Okay.
I can say, I recall from that May 12th evening, one of the reasons why some of the numbers were high is because we had a lot of things being counted almost twice. There were land purchases in that number that had already been encumbered. I can't remember all the details, but we've scrubbed the numbers. We're very confident with what we're presenting here in terms of the bid numbers, construction contingency and the fees, and the estimates for parking and elsewhere, and then we know how much we've spent to date.
There will be no other personnel costs other than the interim programming director?
There will be other personnel costs, and this is just in our capital number. The personnel cost will be in our operating. On an annual basis, we are estimating $146,000. That is less than what AMS suggested, and that is because we are hoping our executive director will be able to undertake the development and marketing role, at least initially, and we're also going to be sharing employees with LexArts, in particular their technical director. We pay part-time, and the LexArts folks would pay part-time.
And
let me say again why the temporary project manager is $7,600. Charlie Millward, who everyone knows, has graciously been willing to serve as our project manager for the next several months. Under our general services department, we are anticipating hiring a new administrative officer, hopefully by the end of August or September. And that person, through transition with Charlie, would then undertake the project management for the rest of the period, be paid for by Urban County government, and will not cost the project any additional dollars.
And you feel confident about the revenue side, the grants, the 100,000 here and the 100,000 there, that the three 100,000 numbers, I guess?
There was certainly some debate on the work group about whether these numbers were too low. Some people thought they were too high, some people thought they were too low. I felt that under presenting sponsorships, for example, we are shooting to have 24 lyric presentations throughout the calendar year. That's 2 a month. So what I was basing it on is assuming we could get corporations to put up $10,000 a piece, and that's for only 10 shows. So if we were able to get them to break it down into, if they needed to break it down into smaller sponsorships, I definitely think that is doable. Under the general fundraising, as Jim Clark mentioned, he had an excellent idea that throughout this coming year, while we're under construction, we have what we will call a Lyric Presents series, and we will partner with either the Downtown Arts Center or Opera House or any other performing arts facility and bring in big artists that we can, whether they're through relationships we already have, like Jim Clark has, or others, and promote those to the entire community to give examples of what the Lyric will have, and then all, or certainly a large percentage of the proceeds will go to benefit the Lyric and will go into that fundraising pot of money.
And one last question. The naming opportunities, I'm hoping that included in that is not to be able to tag something over in front of the Lyric.
That would be up to the board and the executive director at some point, but I think we would all probably advise against that, unless someone came in and wanted to endow us for, $50 million. We might reconsider, but I'm thinking more along the lines of the gallery space, which is going to have a heavy educational component. We've got it fixed up now where it'll have various video screens, interactive capabilities. We think, in talking with some of the arts experts, that this will really help us get national funders to give to the Lyric Theater because of our programming, artistic and educational combinations. And I think we've heard from many organizations, corporations in this community who've talked about wanting to recruit and retain minority employees. And I think that there will be a definite interest from many in wanting to have their name associated with this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good presentation, Shay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stinnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Shay, thank you for coming before us today and chairing the work group. And thank you for all the members who took time out to bring this to us, because it was a lot of work, and we appreciate your timeliness in getting this bid to us. I have a couple questions on your numbers. One glaring thing that stands out is missing is, what is the bond payment that LFUCG will be required to make based on the $6 million? Is it in there?
I don't have it in here. That would be an annual expense.
Right, for 20 years.
I believe it was estimated to be $490,000. Does that ring any bells to anybody? Yeah. Bill O'Meara is coming up here.
Sorry, they were talking to me. The question is,
$6 million, what would that service be?
about $450,000 a year.
Better news, 450, not 490.
So in addition to your operating numbers of about $300,000 the first year from LFUCG in form of a subsidy, we're going to talk about an additional $450,000 total for first year costs once we get the facility open from LFUCG's budget, correct?
That's correct, just like actually all of our capital funded buildings, yes.
So, okay, so since this is a capital funded building, are we not going to bond the entire $7.2 million?
Well, I think I might need some help from Mary Pfister on this. To give some perspective, and again, this is a long project. This is unlike many of our projects we've done. But the sources of the original money came from 3 sources. One was $750,000 back in, I believe, 1990 or 93. That was when Urban County government had a whole lot of money, and we paid for a whole lot of projects out of cash. And a lot of the projects that were on the Memorandum of Understanding were all, the government gave each of those projects money, including $4 million to the Downtown Arts Center that we paid for with cash back in 2003, believe it or not. The Lyric got $750,000 in a pot. The other two sources were bonded already. $250 from a Public Facilities Corporation revenue bond and $250 from a neighborhood development bond. So I'm unclear, first of all, whether or not we can rebond that $500,000 again. And then there's some debate as to whether or not we can go back and bond funds that were already spent prior to a reimbursement resolution. And Bill is coming up here.
See that. I talked to bond counsel, and we have a 60-day window. The reimbursement resolution has to be within 60 days before the project is started. So we're too late to do a reimbursement resolution for that $750 that was spent back in 2004.
It wasn't spent in 2004. It was spent like years before that.
Well, more than 60 days ago. I was going to say a long time ago. Yeah, as far as the other existing bonds, we would look at those as any others, whether it makes sense to refinance. That's what I was going to ask you. Where are we at? Do we have any idea where we're at on the existing bonds? How many years we've paid into them? And
I do not know the details of those. I have talked to financial advisors as to which bonds that we have outstanding that might be candidates that would make sense to reissue. Whether they were included in that bond issue, I don't know the answer to that.
And Bill, are we still looking at, if we bond this $6 million, are we looking at waiting until January of 2010 to even contemplate bonding the money?
Well, that was our original plan. We need to see how much everybody wants us to spend between then and now.
So we may not have enough money. The point is, we may not have enough money in this year's budget to cash flow that until...
We're doing that analysis between now and September.
But you don't look very optimistic in terms of, are you saying we may move that?
Optimistic face on.
We may move that up? I'm just trying to figure out the impact on our general fund.
I don't know the answer. We have intended not for this to be a 2010 budget impact. And so we're assessing that as we look at revenues coming in and the commitments that the 2010 budget has.
So it'd be safe to say we're on a month-to-month decision on this. We may have to bond it sooner.
But it's not this, it's the total bond package. You know,
right.
We're trying to do the 2009 this October, we're trying to cash flow the 2010 CIP into next fiscal year. That's the question that's on us, whether we can afford to do that.
Well, I mean, so you're lumping this in with every other bond. There's no opportunity to go ahead and bond this separately to get the project moving so we can get it done by our deadline?
That is an option. We just need to see whether that's the best option or not.
Okay. I'm sure we'll have this discussion again. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks to Shay and the work group who worked so hard for so long to put this together. I have a question for Dr. Everett McCorvey, and I slipped back to make sure I wasn't springing anything on Dr. McCorvey. Dr. McCorvey is a professor at UK School of Music who is in large part responsible for the Grand Night for Singing and the Our Lincoln program and many, many other Metropolitan Opera auditions and things. He is a one-man walking arts community. So I wanted to talk to him a little bit. Dr. McCorvey, would you mind telling us what you think that the Lyric Theater, the impact it'll have on the Lexington arts and music scene, but also the national the national scene?
Well, I think that the most important impact that it will have is that it will bring a pride to the Lexington community that's been waiting on this project for quite a long time. And I think that it has the opportunity to be a cultural center that the community could take pride in, not only celebrating African American culture, but celebrating all cultures. And I have come to be involved in the project late as well. But I must say that I've become very excited about the project because of the community that it could serve and the purpose that it could serve within in the arts community. And especially, we don't have a place now that if we want to concentrate on and celebrate African American culture, we don't have a place really that we can bring those different art forms to Lexington, and also a place that is dedicated to trying to find those different art forms and bring them to Lexington to celebrate. And so I think that's what that's the role that it'll play.
So do you think this will help us connect to the national scene and the international scene as well?
Well, it'll help us connect in that we will have a venue where these art forms can travel. I mean, they will go to different places around the country that have African-American centers, and I think that Lexington will now be one of those places that those types of presentations can consider.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Can we pull this off?
Well, I think it's got to be a community effort. I think that it has to have a way that it can sustain itself over a period of time, and I think that getting the right people involved, and especially if the businesses and community come on board and support it. I think that I was one of the ones that thought that the number that Shay put together in terms of the sponsorships was probably a little low. I think that with the businesses that we have in the community, if they see this as a worthwhile project, that they will hopefully come in and support it. And I think we have to have something for our African American community and our, especially people who enjoy the arts and enjoy having an arts scene. The African American community wants a place that they can also be proud of, that is theirs, and that they see as a place that they can bring different types of arts events in. I was in Louisville a few months ago to hear the Evan Ailey Dance Theater, and I was sitting there, and it was probably my first meeting after the workforce started, and I was sitting there envisioning not the Alvin Ailey Theater, because we don't have a big enough space, but Alvin Ailey 2 could come to the Lyric and present a performance there. Or many of us had the opportunity a few months ago to attend the Wynton Marsalis concert that was at Singletary Center. And it would be great to have a place like that, that we could bring artists of that stature into a place and celebrate the Lyric Center. So it's going to be it'll be a challenge for everyone, but I think it's an investment well worth making.
Well, Dr. McCorvey, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. Dr. McCorvey's involvement in it, I think, is very important. I was just blown away by Grand Night for Singing, that we would have something as internationally professional, and it would be a success anywhere in the world, and to have that amount of expertise and talent here in Lexington is amazing, and his involvement in the Lyric Theater, I think, is very, very important, and I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Shay, and to all the work group who took time to work on this. I have just a couple personnel questions. On the summary pro forma page, I believe I heard you say this represents year one. I'll let you get to the page first. Ours doesn't have a page number on it, so
This is essentially year 1 and 2 because
Okay.
of the $150,000 subsidy from Urban County government. But in your packet, the Lyric packet, on page 13 is the pro forma, and somewhere in here, page 18 is the staffing. It has the staffing.
I apologize. I don't have that, so I'm not looking at it.
Okay.
But I heard you say that under personnel, that the Lyric would share a technical director with Lex Arts.
Correct.
Is that currently, and Jim, this may be a question for you, a full-time position at Lex Arts?
No.
Is it a position at all?
Yes, at the Downtown Art Center, we have a part-time, 50%.
Okay.
And this gives us a real opportunity to share that expense and have somebody who could work full-time and operate between the two facilities. They would be working with younger talent, perhaps students from UK or Transy in the theater departments, who would be able to carry on when they're working at a different facility. So we could use it as internship training, which is another opportunity that this project brings, is a way to provide internships and residencies for students at UK and Transy.
I think that's a great idea to share a position like that. And is there, when we talked about this quite a while ago, one of my concerns was the curator for the museum. What's the thinking about that? Will that be shared with someone or contracted, or where is that?
It would be a combination. We would not have a full-time curator hired by by the Lyric. Many of the exhibits that will come through will be rotating. The instructions are there of what you need to do. What we will do is either hire a consultant or contract with someone for that particular exhibit, or work in partnership with the University of Kentucky or another organization for that particular exhibit. And then for any permanent exhibit we may have, that will fall under the responsibility of the executive director.
Okay. So this $146,330, it represents several positions. Now, are you imagining all of these will be in place immediately, since this is year 1 and 2, or is there any kind of a phase in?
Well, the executive director would have to be hired immediately. The technical director, which is important to understand the components and of the facility and what it's capable of, that will be probably a logical second step in partnering with Lex Arts. The other components are the event services manager, and these are all part-time or hourly, and then the front of house manager, those are the people who do the soundboards, and then the box office staff and administrative staff that will be combined. Those people could be hired as funds become available. We'd like to have as many people hired as early as possible so we can get the programming up and running as soon as possible as well.
Right.
What we have envisioned for this coming year is to use some of the available fund balance from the Lyric to hire a consultant, if you will, to start helping us. And when I say us, I also mean the board, once it's up in place, start contacting and reaching out to the performers that may come and perform or exhibit their work, and then transition into, while we're doing the search for the executive director, go ahead and have someone up and running, and we have that number reflected here as the interim programming director.
Okay. One kind of general question. Is this plan something that was pretty much agreed to by the entire work group? I'm presuming it is. Has the support of everyone?
Nobody said don't send this to the council.
Okay.
But I will tell you that Ed Lane was certainly a devil's advocate on purpose, and we appreciate that, asking the tough questions about everything, and we really do appreciate that because it made us think harder. But there were no objections to sending this to the council.
So it's not like the Supreme Court where we'll have a minority report coming.
I hope we will not. There was conversation, I will say this. There was conversation about, are we ready to come forward to the council?
Okay.
Do we need more information about this or that? The answer is always going to be yes, we need more information. But the reality is, we have bids in for construction. We have a 60-day window from the time we open those bids to begin, or else we lose those numbers. I do not think that we can come back to you with any better information than we have right now that will help allow you all to make a decision any differently than you would today. So we felt now was the time, given our best effort.
Okay, very good. That's fair enough. I'm very excited about this, that we keep taking steps forward, and I appreciate all the hard work on everybody's part. So thank you.
Councilmember Wallace.
I'm very excited about this. I'm familiar with several of the artists and performers that you mentioned in here, and it's really, really exciting, and I hope this turns out to be just one of the most wonderful things that has ever come to Lexington and to Kentucky, and I think it has that potential. My only comment about it is I hope that there will be, that you will allow for ample salary to get an extraordinary executive director who knows how to write grants and knows business, and that's the last place I think you need to skimp. So that being said, I hope that you will, not be...
I was getting ready to make an inappropriate joke about executive director salaries, and I decided that wouldn't be a good thing.
I don't think we need that high.
I will
but
say,
maybe if they had a jet too, it would work.
I will say, Councilmember Lawless, we certainly agree with you, and in consultation with Everett and Jim, they felt that a $50,000 base salary and then with the benefits was a pretty competitive salary for the Lexington area in particular. And they could speak more about that. If eventually we find that we're not able to hire someone at that salary, the board certainly has the authority to up that salary. But we feel like a $50,000, actually we were down at a $40,000 area, and we bumped it up to $50,000.
Yeah, I really think, having been an executive director myself, it's wise not to be penny wise and pound foolish. So that's my, get good personnel in there.
Right.
And, probably not $200,000 or $300,000. Thank you very much, and it's a wonderful presentation, and I can't wait for it to be finished.
Councilmember Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. Just call me the devil's advocate today. First, I'd like to say that I think Shay has done a really good job on this. There's a lot of historical information that had to be reviewed, and I attended, I think, almost all the meetings except when I was on a trip and I was out of town one week. And, Jim Clark and Everett McCorvey, Juanita Peterson, in particular, put a lot of effort into the meetings and putting the information together. And I feel that a great deal of progress has been made, and so that's very encouraging to me. But at the same time, since I'm on the council and I do feel that I needed to point out a few things that I have concerns about to sort of tie in with what we're doing here today, and not necessarily for any other reason than just to raise the awareness of these issues, and just some suggestions that maybe will be constructive and help make this project even better and maybe move along a lot more quickly. The first thing I wanted to touch on was the cost. And I think this is just an area that needs to be aired out, but I believe there was the impression of most council members that our total investment would be $6 million. And some issues have come up where there was overdone some funding early on or what have you that would not be eligible to be reimbursed in the bond that's coming up. But we are going to be at $7.25 million approximately when you add up all the money we've invested. The other concern that I have is I think it would be very, very helpful if we could go ahead immediately and find out who's going to serve on the board, because that is the management. Those are the folks that are going to put their arms around the project and make decisions on where to go and what needs to be done. And I think it's also an indicator of the amount of support from the community that will be supporting the Lyric, and it's something that needs to be done right away. I would have preferred, had we brought in, these 15 people have volunteered to serve on the board, and the mayor could then nominate them, and the council could have approved them, and we would have the board in place, because I think this is absolutely critical. And I would suggest to people that if you were a business and you came to the bank and you said, I want to borrow $6 million, we're going to name our board later and our manager later, and you don't know who's going to be running the show, yet we're still asking to fund this. I think that's something that needs to be done immediately. The other concern that I have is we have made a lot of progress on the parking, but I feel that another issue is we should try to get letters of intent from the people that own property that say we could park on it in the evenings for free or whatever fee, and to also look at whatever cost may be incurred by the Lyric in order to get additional parking. I know you've got a small amount in the budget, but until we had some drawings and estimates of cost, I don't know that we can totally rely on those numbers as being accurate. Another area that I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on is that in our meetings, a couple of ideas came up about how maybe to improve the theater, to give it a little bit more versatility, to be more adaptable to different types of performances. And I want to thank Everett McCorvey in particular for his input, and Jim Clark's input too, because they are the experts in these areas. And before we pull the trigger and go under construction on this, I would like to know that the people involved in the arts that are familiar with putting the performances on and know what the requirements are, at least have a final review and say so on the design issue. Let's see if there's any other point I would like to make here. I think those are the key components, but I would like, again, not to congratulate myself, but to thank the other members of the committee, because I think y'all have worked diligently, and I see this has moved forward substantially, and I'm very encouraged by that.
Thank you.
And the issue of the management and the board, I think, should be of the highest priority and needs to be addressed immediately. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to yield. It looks like Shay was getting ready to respond to something. If you want to do that.
I was just quickly going to say that Dr. McCorvey and Susan Hill from Tate Hill Jacobs have had a meeting and discussed the design and some potential adjustments that might be possible that won't have a major impact on the numbers. Am I accurate with that? Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my first question is, this is on the docket for second reading Thursday. Should we pass that to go back to Councilmember Lane's questions about the board and the director? In passing that, are you asking us to also pass this document sort of as a structure for how the board's going to be set up? Or is that still something that's...
That's up to the council on what they would like to do. This is our recommendation, and the administration will move forward with putting together a 15-member board to bring back to the council as soon as possible.
Okay. And I want to see it move forward Thursday. The reason I asked that question was because I'm trying to understand if by passing that Thursday, do we lock ourselves into the way that this is set up?
No, and in fact, in the beginning of it clearly states that this is just a template for the board and the executive director to use as the community, the urban county government, and the various task forces' best effort with the expertise we have to say, here's what we have in mind, now make it better, basically.
Okay. I just have a couple concerns with respect to the board. One, and I don't know if this is the time to do it, or is that document going to come to us later to approve the management structure of the center? I guess because if it is going to come later, then I can adjust these things later.
Well, what we would like is for the council to approve the contract for construction on Thursday. And whether or not the council approves a board at that time, or you wait until the first meeting back, that's up to you all. And, one of the things that I'm reluctant to do is move really fast to put a board together. I completely understand what Councilmember Lane is talking about, needing a board in place quickly, but if there's input from the council that you don't like the way we proposed it, and then we bring it forward, and so then you don't pass, what position does that put us in, basically? I would prefer to not appoint the board until we come back from break, but if that's going to put the construction up in the air, then we'll appoint a board tomorrow.
No, I'm with you 100%. I don't want to put the board in place today or tomorrow. I can wait until we get back. My questions are more about some of the structure that's in here and whether or not by passing that Thursday we lock ourselves into that structure.
Are you talking about the board structure?
Right, and just some of the, I have concerns. One, I think I'd like to see term limits on the, my concern is once the mayor is no longer appointing to the board, how things really work.
Yeah, the 501c3 would have to pass their own bylaws, and, we could strongly recommend that they have term limits. But what this report is simply a response to the request by Councilmember Lane, Councilmember DeCamp, and others along the way to have a business plan in place before they would allow construction to move forward. So there is no one is asking for this plan to be adopted or codified or anything like that, but rather it was a effort to make the council and the community
Sure.
more comfortable with the project.
Okay, I'm comfortable with the project, no doubt about that. So it sounds like we're not codifying this structure at this time, so I'm good to go, and we'll just talk about my questions later on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Vice Mayor Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. I, too, will share the same sentiments that others have already expressed in terms of the thanks to the committee, Juanita, to your group, Shay for the heavy lifting here, Councilmember James for the passion that you brought to this. Sometimes in the course of these deliberations, I suspect that we've all learned that often that we need to give the souffle time to rise, and sometimes it takes a little while. And that in the course of doing that, we examine some of the issues more carefully. We confirm the numbers, and that relieves some of the anxiety and allows us to then translate the real meaning and the spirit of a project like this, the passion of it, at the right time, in a really passionate way, in an inspired way. And that seems to be where we are. And for that, I want to thank all of you all who have worked so hard with such a high level of commitment to the project. There was a little sidebar conversation between council members Gorton and Ellinger and I, which I think Councilmember Myers was just really representing in terms of the structure and composition, in terms of the number of board members, and I think that's what we were hearing is that can be worked through as we continue downstream, right?
I do not object to that.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lane.
Yeah. Just as a follow-up thought, I think if we're going to vote on this on the next council meeting, I think it would be helpful if you could have the bond debt calculated for the 20-year period, and we can see what the debt service for the 20-year period would be, and then perhaps have some kind of a projected estimate of what the operating cost and the supporting cost that you were proposing the Durham County government to pay maybe for the first 5 years, so that we could look, as the council at the total cost to, for the next 5 years on that.
Right.
That's the last council member that's indicated a desire to speak. Subsequent to our starting the meeting, I learned that we have one individual that would like to speak on the matter of the Lyric, and if there's no objection, I thought now might be an appropriate time. Griffin Van Meter, if you could step to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes.
I would just like to use my 3 minutes to voice my support for the Lyric Theater. I'm a resident of the area, a business owner in the area that has a lot of money invested in the area, a lot of time, and I think with the public, this is a great opportunity for a public-private partnership for you guys, for the city to invest in the area, and I think what will happen is a huge catalyst in terms of economic development, revitalization for this 3rd Street corridor, East End, Central sector. One business that I'm a partner in is Al's Bar, which is on the corner of Lime and 6th. And it's a huge success. There's 0 parking, but people come to it day in and day out. Some of the council members have come to it. And it's served as an economic catalyst for people to move down into the area, to get exposed to the area, for people to buy houses in the area. And I think the Lyric would be like Al's Bar tenfold in terms of economics for the area and revitalization. And I think if the city is serious about wanting to invest in people and to see Lexington transform into the city that we all want it to be, this is the opportunity for it. This is the starting point, and it'll be a home run, I think. And I think that's shown through the support here, through the work that's done by this committee to get this thing pushed forward. And I hope on Thursday night you guys will see that this is a huge, huge opportunity for this area, for this city, for our people. It's not just an African American thing. It's really it's a whole city thing. It's a Lexington thing. And it really gives us something to embrace, and something that we can say is our legacy and something to hold on to. So vote yes on Thursday night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Meter. Any other member of the council have any questions or comments? Well, let me add my own words of appreciation to many of you who are here with regard to the Lyric. I think your presence speaks volumes, and Juanita and several of you, you've done yeoman's work for a long, long time, and I'm very appreciative of the effort that you and the other members of the task force have put into the project to get us where we are today. I got to say a special word of thanks to Shay Raybould for her efforts, because she has worked very diligently to pull all of this together, and she's done it with a great deal of passion, which I appreciate. So thank you. And if there's nothing further, we'll move on to our next presentation. Thank you very much for being here today. Mr. Tate, if you'll come forward and visit with us about the downtown master plan.
Third time today for you. Third time today for you to get with me. Good afternoon. Appreciate you having me here today, and I'm going to give you a update in terms of the downtown master plan. Whoop. Yeah, I told you. All righty. I think you have this handout in your packet as well. And unfortunately, I believe it's in black and white. But the first recommendation they had was to change land use. And one of the things that, for some of you all who were at our meeting this morning, which was a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Council, as Chris King and I were indicating at that point, this is a process that's going to be ongoing in terms of what we need to do to create new categories to allow different types of uses in the downtown area. And to date, we have been quite successful in creating quite a few new categories for land use and for zoning. It's also allowed us to make some changes within our ordinance in terms of the sign ordinance, how it works downtown. And the Planning Commission has approved some measures that will be coming before you that were a result of the infill and redevelopment report that allows some flexibility within not just the downtown area, but the areas surrounding downtown as well. So as I said, we see this recommendation one that's going to be ongoing. It will not come to an end at any time because we want to be able to continue that flexibility and that creativity to allow downtown to develop in the type of downtown that we all want. The next one we had was to establish form-based guidelines. Once again, not to repeat, but this morning you saw a presentation that Chris King did on form-based guidelines, what it is, how it can be established, the different types of form-based guidelines that you have. So I think we've taken the first step this morning by talking about what these guidelines could be, where they could be, and the type of information that could be within the guidelines themselves. So once again, I see this as one, as we are now in the process of reviewing to determine through the Planning Commission, through the Council, and through the DDA if we do need to move forward with this recommendation. Convert all one-way streets to two-way. Want to report that on as a result of Streetscape, you all asked us to go back and look at the one-way versus two-way process. We came back to you all on April 28th with a process as to, in terms of how the one-way streets would be converted into two-way. At that meeting, you did review, ask questions, and told us to move forward with this process. So we are doing it as we speak with the Short and Second Street, and we'll be coming back to you with the help of Mike Webb and his staff in terms of the Second and Short Street conversion. Recommendation 4, increase residential development. With the economy the way it is, it's kind of hard to do this one right now, but we're still moving forward. Over the last 3 years, an additional 900 units, residential units, have been produced in the downtown area. That does not include what is done through single-family detached homes as they do rehabs, but this will be a continuing process. Last week, you heard a presentation from George Akorian in terms of his mixed-use project on Angliana and South Broadway, where he will have a component of residential units as well. So this is an ongoing goal as well, or recommendation. Fifth recommendation was to establish a parking authority. We were fortunate we were able to do that some time ago. You all have had the experience of working with them. They've made quite a few recommendations, quite a few changes. They've kind of brought the city back into the 21st century by adding different methods for parking meters to be everything from solar power parking stations to pay by phone. So in the future, you'll be able to pay your parking meter by a phone call, and that will be very, very convenient for a lot of people who are in a meeting who know their meter's about ready to stop and they need to add some time on that. So the parking authority has been created and is underway. Recommendation 6 is maximize density in vacant sites. We are averaging about 50 units per acre in the downtown area versus the 3.75 units per acre in the suburbs. So we see this recommendation once again being something that will continue on and being encouraged throughout our development of the downtown area. Recommendation 7, celebrate the urban entrances. This is one we're starting the process on. Streetscape plan, when it was done, it did address some key areas where we needed to start looking at this in terms of letting people know when they're into the urban core of our downtown area. Jim Clark's not here, but Jim Clark has been working with LexArt with the DDA in terms of some ideas of what we can do, and I think on the streetscape plan you'll see quite a few changes that will be addressed next year as we move forward on the implementation. Recommendation 8, investigating a pedestrian network. Once again, back to streetscape. This is one that you as the council felt it was very important that we move forward. So you all are ones who approved the RFP to allow us to do the streetscape plan, and we are now in the process of starting on phase 1, as some of you all are aware of, and this is a long-term process that will work, but what it does is starts adding methods to connect neighborhoods to downtown, downtown to the university, downtown to Transylvania, and to other entities that surround the downtown area. So recommendation 8 is underway as we speak. Recommendation 9, integrate Rupp Arena into the urban fabric. This process is one that is under investigation with the Lexington Center Board in terms of how does the new arena fit within the area, and also reflects another recommendation I'll get to in a minute that deals with the Cox Street parking lot as well. Develop Vine Street. Back again to streetscape plan. KKG has developed some corridor along Vine Street that does not reflect this pattern here, but does reflect a pattern that brings pedestrian movement, bike traffic. It shrinks the street, adds public art into the Vine Street corridor. So once again, through the streetscape plan, we're working on recommendation number 10. Recommendation 11 is to create the amphitheater. Well, Lexington Center looks like they're taking another step farther by looking at all of the Cox Street parking lot now. As you saw in the paper a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Corman is interested in integrating into the Cox Street parking area as well. And I believe Lexington Center is looking at doing a small area plan for the entire Cox Street area. To me, that is extremely important because what that does, it provides that tie between Lexington Center, Manchester Street, the Town Branch Trail, other activities that are occurring in that area. So this is a very important recommendation, and we're excited and encouraged that the Lexington Center Board is moving forward with this. Create a community center, museum site. This kind of reflects this, what you just heard. When this master plan was being developed, at the time it was George Brown who was the council person. He had enabled us many meetings to go down into the East End neighborhood, and we were absolutely amazed with the history that was in that neighborhood that reflects not just the horse industry, but the neighborhood itself. So we felt it was very important that we look at some way to establish some type of center to identify that. And at that time, Milton Mahoney was the CAO. He took this recommendation, embraced it, added it to the Lyric Theater, and this is something that Charlie Boland and Al Shea are working forward with, as you just heard from the presentation. Recommendation 13 is to look at defining the spatial character along Main Street. This is an intersection of Midland and Main. As you can see, Thoroughbred Park at the top, and that is the Harold Leader parking lot behind it. This is something that the consultant at the committee just felt that we need to stabilize that intersection by providing, as you can see in the sketch below, to help start bringing that intersection together, give it more of an urban feel that it has instead of a surface parking lot. Wanted to look at creating urban spaces within the downtown. This is an example on Rose Street. Once again, through the streetscape plan, KKG has gone through to look at what we can do to green our streets up in the downtown area. This recommendation was to look at the parking lot at American Founders Bank, and then also green up the area in front of the senior citizen building in between Vine and Main Street. make farmers market a permanent amenity to downtown. We looked at 5 sites in the downtown area, or 6 sites, I'm sorry. One was along Vine Street itself. The second one was there at the intersection of Main and Cox Street. A second. Sorry about that. I thought this had a pointer on it, doesn't. The second one was within the Manchester Street area. The third was located at Maxwell and Broadway. Oh, thank you. That's Cox Street and Main Street, and then it's the Manchester Street area. This would be Maxwell, Broadway. We looked at the area along Vine Street itself. We looked at the Cheapside Park area, and then we looked at the Charles Young area. A final recommendation never was made from the consulting team, but they felt that these were 6 sites that we should look at to go ahead and move forward in terms of finding a permanent location. Currently, we're working on, as you know, the Cheapside area as an area for the farmers market. The last recommendation was to what we could do to bring Town Branch as make it part of a entity of the downtown, especially in terms of the historic aspect to the community itself. This is a sketch showing High Street. Kind of hard to see. And then this is going down to the Cox Street parking lot. This would be a new building that they had sketched. And what this would do is take the entity that Van Meter Pettit and his group had been working on out to Masterson Station and bring that trail into the downtown area. As you know, that part of the trail is under construction. Part of the Manchester Street TIF project was to move this project forward, and at the current state, that is what the TIF plan will be using some funds for. What we tried to do is create a plan that would allow us flexibility. It could change over time. And we wanted to be able to not be site-specific. As you can see, we were pretty limited in terms of the areas that we were site-specific. We wanted to be able to come up with ideas and recommendations that the city itself, not just the DDA, but the planning staff, the planning commission, engineering, other people could work with as well to make our downtown much more enjoyable, pedestrian, entertainment, residential area.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Tate? All right. Councilmember Lane.
Yeah, I do have one question. You mentioned something about 900 housing units. Are those ones that are currently being developed at this time, or was that a cumulative number over a couple of years?
Cumulative over time.
Okay, well, we have the 524 development and the Lex development. About how many units are those? Do you know?
The Lex project itself?
Yes, sir.
It's about 500 beds, I believe, somewhere around in that area. What they do on a lot of the, quote, college-related projects, they go by bed, they don't go by bedroom. So
you would have bedrooms with the shared common areas and all that?
Right.
Well, how about the 524? What type of development is that? Over on Angliana?
That one is very minimal. I believe right now they're looking at about 100 units.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Mayor. Harold, you were talking about site-specific, and of course you mentioned one site which somewhat dear to my heart. Why would anybody ever conceive that a bank would want to give up a 50-car parking lot?
I think the concept behind that was to kind of help green that project. One thing we talked about with parking itself, surface parkings aren't always the best use in the downtown area. We should look at surface parking as being areas for development, or in this opportunity, a green space, since we have limited green space in the downtown area.
It just depends on whose ox is getting gored, I think, is really the situation, because not that I want to speak necessarily for American Founders, but if it was still First Security Bank of Lexington, sorry about your luck.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything further for Mr. Tate? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate your being here. We're now ready for council reports. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to announce that the Harrods Hill Neighborhood Association is sponsoring 2 events for the 4th of July at 10 a.m. They will bring your decorated wagons and bike strollers and even pets for a parade beginning at Forts Harrods and Mantilla. Prizes will be awarded to the most patriotic bike or wagon or stroller. Later that day, the neighborhood will have a potluck dinner at 6 p.m., followed by live music from the Victor English Band at 7 p.m. Also tonight at 7 is the Southland Jamboree continues at the Southland Bowling Lanes. Please come out for great food and bluegrass music. Mayor, I also have a walk-on at the request of the administration. I move to place on the docket for July 2nd, 2009 council meeting an ordinance amending the salary schedules to provide non-bargaining employees with a 1% pay increase and to adjust the salary structure for bargaining unit members in the Division of Community Corrections and fire majors in the Division of Fire and Emergency Services. This pay increase does not include seasonal employees in account 332 or parks and recreation employees in accounts 333 and 334. So moved.
Do I hear a second? Have a motion by Councilmember Martin and a second by Councilmember Myers to add that item to the docket. Councilmember Gordon.
Mayor, I'm not sure of the significance of this. I thought that we had put that in the budget. Can someone give us a little detail?
I will call on Bill O'Mara to do just that. Bill, can you talk to us on this?
I may have missed some of the nuance as you were reading it, so.
Mayor, while he's walking down, would you like me to read it again?
That would be good, yes.
So this is the motion. I move to place on the docket for July 2nd, 2009 council meeting an ordinance amending the salary schedules to provide non-bargaining employees with a 1% pay increase and to adjust the salary structure for bargaining unit members in the Division of Community Corrections and fire majors in the Division of Fire and Emergency Services. This pay increase does not include seasonal employees in account 332 or parks and recreation employees in accounts 333 and 334.
Exactly correct. You gave second reading to the 2010 budget. This is updating our ordinance schedule to match the raise that you approved in the 2010 budget.
So it's nothing different. It's not something we didn't mean to do.
But it has to be done in order
Yes,
for
I
us
understand.
for it to be on the paychecks.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember James.
Thank you, Mayor. In regards to this motion, the fact that we're passing, is it an ordinance that we're doing or is it a resolution? It's a resolution,
I think
Councilmember
it's
Martin?
an ordinance because the pay scales are in the book of ordinance.
Okay. So all the discussion we had about personnel and where if council had made a request to include certain personnel, additional, I'm sorry, I'm not getting my words together here, the additional positions that we've put in the budget, is this the similar process that we need to go through for that? So we talked about, is it appropriate for council to pass an ordinance basically stamping what it is that we intend to have happen? This seems very familiar to what we were asking, that we were told this is not what we're supposed to do as council. Do you understand what I'm saying, what I'm asking?
Not completely. Let me
Okay.
give it a shot and see if we're on the same
Okay.
wavelength. In the budget, there was a 1% raise for non-sworn, as well as incorporated what was already contractually obligated for FY 2010, those people that are under different contracts. There is in our code of ordinance, if you're a scale of a 107, here's the min, the mid, and the max. And if you're a 112 and if you're a 115, that all has to raise up by 1% in order for the code of ordinance to be updated to what the 2010 budget approved.
Okay.
So the budget is approved by ordinance, and now we're coming, after the budget has been approved, we're updating the code of ordinance that has each of those they're not called steps anymore. I'm at a loss as to the proper terminology, but
Levels or something like
yes.
that? Okay.
And I hope I'm not totally messing that up in the explanation.
Okay. So we're not really approving a certain personnel dollar amount, we're just approving the increase for those different levels.
The amount was approved in the budget. Now we're getting the individual listing in sync with what was approved in the budget.
And the amount that was approved in the budget includes the personnel positions that the council asked to be
For instance,
included.
if you added two positions in internal audit, then that was approved with the budget. Now we're approving what is the pay scale for the internal audit.
Okay. And so then once we approve that, then that is then done. So then the 1% automatically starts from July 1.
With this paycheck.
And then-
Actually, it's the first pay period in July.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Any further discussion on Councilmember Martin's motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Those in favor of placing that item on the docket for July 2nd, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
All right. I think it's Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two items. I wanted to update the council. This morning, we held our joint Planning Commission, Planning Committee workshop, and it was very well attended. We had almost all of the council Planning Committee members and a good representation from the Planning Commission, and we had a very, I thought, a very good discussion. The first hour we spent with Bob Wiseman from the University of Kentucky, and he gave a presentation of the UK Master Plan, and we saw what they're intending on, among other things, student housing, and it was extremely good and gave council members an opportunity to ask questions of Bob Wiseman. And then the second hour, we spent talking about form-based code, which you heard is one of the recommendations of the Downtown Master Plan. And we have scheduled our next joint workshop on September 29th, at which time we will take the form-based code discussion to the next level. And then the second item is I've been asked by the administration to move an item onto the docket. Council members, you'll remember during all of the Stormwater Fee Task Force meetings and subsequently the water quality fee discussions that one of the items is that the urban county government needed to negotiate with Kentucky American Water to do the billing, accounting, and collecting of this new fee. And so our folks from finance have been undertaking that negotiation, and you probably had help. So with that said, I have this motion. They have completed their negotiations. I move to place on the docket for Thursday night's council meeting a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Kentucky American Water Company for the billing, accounting, and collecting of the water quality management fee at a cost not to exceed 36.23 cents per month for each account billed. So moved.
A motion by Councilmember Gorton and a second by Councilmember McCord to add that item to Thursday night's docket. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lane.
Yeah, is there someone here that could speak to that fee?
Bill O'Mara.
Bill O'Mara would
Bill
be the
O'Mara,
appropriate
okay.
person. Again, we may just have to reserve him a front row seat here for the duration.
Yes, sir.
Since Kentucky American's already sending out bills, and this would be basically collecting the data and putting it on the line item on the current invoice, do you feel that the fee being proposed is reasonable, I guess is my question?
Yes, I do. I think that it's a good contract. It is It is below their market with other municipalities that they do the same similar work for. It does include more than what they've done for us before. If there's someone without a water bill, they will create an account and bill that person. And it is very competitive with what we're already paying them for the same services for the landfill user fee.
When you translate that into total number of households or businesses that will be billed, can you give me an idea of what the...
About 100,000.
Per year or per month?
Per month.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions with regard to this motion? Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Mayor. That's in addition to what they are already billing for the sewer, which is roughly 600,000, as I remember, something in that ballpark.
The sewer is, Councilmember Gordon has the exact amount. It's about 69 cents. They're taking their water volume, calculating it, having exclusions and credits, and servicing those people that are in the sewered area, which is not the entire Fayette County. The landfill is a per unit charge, $4.50 per container, and that is for the area where those services are contained. This is going to be for the entire Fayette County, regardless of whether there is a current water account or not.
I understand, but what I'm driving at is we're going to be giving Kentucky American how much in total?
It's 400 and some odd thousand on an annual basis. For FY 2010, I think it's 217,000 for the 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on Councilmember Gordon's motion? Councilmember Lane.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is a high fee or a low fee, but it was the first time I was aware of it. And, it's sort of short notice. I feel like when we're approving these kind of contracts, which are fairly substantial, maybe we should have a little more notice. We could at least look at the numbers. I mean, it may be a bargain, but getting it just at the last minute here, I don't know whether, I'm happy or not.
Right. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to comment. I just got this today, and of course, we've all known, if you've been reading the minutes and followed the meetings, that they were in negotiations. So I think everything is kind of like a domino effect, and as soon as we can approve this, and it is very good, this fee to Kentucky American is much lower than the sanitary sewer fee, and then it's just a hair above the landfill user fee. And I think once we can get this in place, then they can do the next step to get the water quality fee in place. So,
could I just follow up with one question? Are we going to be billed monthly or every other month for this fee?
Monthly.
So the water bills, they're billed monthly now too, so everything will be on a monthly cycle. All right. Okay.
I would also add that the negotiations concluded on Friday, if I recall correctly.
Right. Well, I don't mean to, pick on anybody, but I'm just saying, we're here representing the people, and to throw this at us with no advance notice, we haven't had a chance to review it. I don't think that I'm doing a good job representing my constituents by not having time to at least review the numbers. That's all I'm saying. But I understand how the wheels of progress are, and the bureaucracy pumps it out when it can. But when will this fee be effective at the first of the year? So why do we need to approve it immediately? Why couldn't we wait for another period of time to have time to review these numbers a little bit more in detail?
I nodded my head too quickly, Councilmember.
Okay.
It's effective in July. It will be implemented in January. But the significance for the approval now is they have to do a lot of programming in the month of July and August in order to meet our development requirements for the total system to be in place in January. So it's a domino effect where each key fits in. If I could just put it in perspective, there was an extended conversation of what vehicle would be best to use for collection, and the subcommittee and the council agreed that Kentucky American Water would be the best interest as far as efficiencies and total cost. And the amount that you're about to agree to is less than the budget we used when we put together the first year projections.
All right, well, I think I like Kentucky American, and they send me my bill every month, and it's usually correct. And there was one month when there was a mistake on it, and they immediately got it fixed. And I believe in outsourcing, and I'm not recommending that the government hire any more people and do our own billing. But I just thought, since we're already doing these bills already, and it's going to be the same postage, same envelope, same invoice, we're just going to add more line items in, that, perhaps, maybe the fee would be less than that. But as I said, because I just got the information and haven't had a chance to really evaluate it, I can't really tell one way or the other. I don't want to belabor this. So let me say thank you, and I'll sign off.
There's no belaboring about it at all, because the issues you raise are legitimate ones. However, we're only voting today to put it on the docket for a first reading on Thursday and a second reading and final approval next Tuesday. And certainly in the meantime, whatever information you'd like to get about the process, the details, feel free to contact Mr. O'Mara, because he can fill you in.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe just a short memo explaining the fee arrangement would be helpful.
We'll get that squared away for you then. Vice Mayor Gray.
I don't know that much about this, but I do know that $1.2 million a year, I would share Councilmember Lane's concerns that we need to dig into it a little bit more. Again, is that correct? $100,000 a month? Is that what I heard correctly or not? What's the number?
100,000 households.
100,000. Okay, so what's the
times
May I-
36 cents.
Yeah, may I jump in? The fiscal year, the annual impact is $434,000, 760. That's the annual.
Okay. All right. So the original programming costs is where significant costs would occur.
There will
And
be.
then after that, it would be essentially an annuity.
I wouldn't go that
income.
far. There is care and maintenance. We're going to be sharing information back and forth on a regular
Right.
basis. They'll be notifying us of new accounts. We'll be notifying them of changes. And so there is ongoing expense.
Okay. Well, I think what the issue here, in my view at least, is the extent to which we have any level of competition or an adequate due diligence on developing the criteria and then measuring the cost going forward. And I believe that, am I translating your question, that issue, Councilmember Lane, correctly?
Yeah, I think if the memorandum could just explain how they determine the fee, I would presume they've estimated how many people would have to work on it, what the payroll would be, and, the additional mailing cost and, overhead for the facilities and computers and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of expense involved in this, I believe. But I think just to give us an idea of what it is, it would be good.
Purely from a conceptual point of view, I'm always concerned whenever I hear that we are lower than our budget. Our budget may be higher than what it ought to be. So finding a competitive level of service is what we're talking about here, and being confident that what we vote on reflects that competitive level of service. And especially when we're talking about annuity service contracts. Thank you.
Councilmember Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is on the same lines. And I'll start backing up. A while back, we had a closed session about collecting of certain taxes. And I guess my question is, have we as a government looked at the aggregate of all the different fees like this that we're paying, we're outsourcing to have someone else collect, what it would take for us to do that in-house if we did them all? And would it be cost effective for us to do that?
In regards to this issue, we covered that pretty extensively in the Stormwater Task Force, and I'll be glad to reiterate that in this memo. And collection rate is a key component on defining what is the most efficient use of a billing service.
Right, I understand that. But if you look at, well, how many different fees are we collecting as a government that we're outsourced the collection of?
I would have to get back to you that. I can think of 4 right now, 3 of which are Kentucky American. If you look at the sanitary, landfill, and now water quality, we also use an outsource a service on ambulance billing.
Okay. Just in your spare time, could you take a look at all of those and then see if it would be cost effective if we took all of them in-house, not just one individual?
We have done that numerous times, but I'll be
It still comes
glad
back,
to
it's
look
more
at it.
cost effective to do it outsourced?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Those in favor of adding to Thursday night's docket a resolution authorizing an agreement with Kentucky American, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stinnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one item, and unfortunately it has to do with our recently passed FY 2010 budget. There was an error in the funding for the Animal Care and Control Office, at least in the intentions of what was recommended for the changing to keep their budget so that we can have 10 officers. There was $12,000 that was inadvertently left out of the final budget once we approved it, which would go towards either keeping the 10th officer or funding their vehicle maintenance line item, which was part of the money, I think, of the confusion that was left out. So I'll make a motion to add $12,000 to the annual Animal Care and Control's FY 2010 budget. The funds will be taken from council-approved budget fund balance for FY 2010. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? The motion then is to place that item on the docket for...
First reading Thursday night, Mayor.
All right. All those in, Councilmember Martin.
Councilmember Senate, exactly where was the money coming from? That went by fast.
It was coming from the council-approved FY 2010 fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And a lot of words there, sorry.
My budget.
Not your 10th district budget, no.
Could you restate that one more time, please?
Sure. I'll make a motion to add $12,000 to Animal Care and Control's FY 2010 budget. That's it. Again, this money was in there last year. It just, when we added it all up, it was left out.
Call the motion.
But again, the motion is to add an ordinance or resolution, I'm not sure, budget amendment to the docket for first reading on Thursday.
Right. Yes, sir.
Those in favor of adding that item to Thursday's docket, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Councilmember Lawless.
I have one just quick announcement because I think a lot of people in the community will be interested, and then I have a motion. At the July 8th Courthouse Area Review Board, Design Review Board, July 8th, at 2 p.m. in council chambers, there's been an application by the Centerpoint folks to renew their permission to move forward. It will expire November 10th, and building permits have to be issued by then, and they're asking that it be moved up to July 15th, and that hearing will be on July 8th in council chambers at 2 p.m. It will have to be over at 7 because we have a council meeting, I think. Secondly, I have a motion. I move to amend item 22 under first reading resolutions of the work copy to change item 22 from a resolution to an ordinance and to include budget amendment scheduled number 29 in the amount of $14,200,000 $260,916. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Lawless and a second by Councilmember Blues to amend item number 22 under resolutions as specified. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councilmember Lawless.
This is to accept, it would be the first reading of an ordinance to accept a bid from ATS Construction in the amount of $13,146,557 for the South Limestone Streetscape. And I want to start by saying I am extremely excited and supportive of the streetscape projects. I think Cleat has done a wonderful and incredible job, and lots of other folks in the city have also worked very hard on it. However, my concern with this one is that we don't, and I've sat in on the interviews with the only viable bidder on the construction. I've gone through the documents. I've talked to business owners and lots and lots of folks. My problem with this is that this, while it was listed in Phase 1, has been given an arbitrary and deadline of July of 2010. And as a result, I don't feel like we are going to be able to have all the information we need to make an informed decision about moving forward in a way that will be the least costly and disruptive, not only to that area and the business owners, but the entire community. I asked for a list of all the street and road projects that are going on. And there doesn't seem to really be a comprehensive list. So the Maxwell Street project with the bicycles will be going on this summer. UK is closing part of Leader Avenue. The Newtown Pike extension will be in process, I assume. The Cox to Boulevard area will be part of that. We talked about two-way streets on Short and Second. Apparently, as of today, I found out that with meetings with the Newtown Pike folks, they said not to do that while they're doing Newtown Pike because it would create problems with detour. There's the Alexandria and Old Frankfort Pike project. And so one of my big concerns is that if we don't do this well and we don't do it efficiently, that this will be the only bite we have at the streetscape apple. And that it is so important to our downtown and our economic development and a vibrant community, a green community, stormwater, et cetera, that we need to take our time to find out what all street and road projects are going on by different folks, what street closures will be impacted while this street is closed, and are we going to create a huge gridlock in our city where nobody can get in or out for anything? So that's one of my primary concerns. The other concern is that we have Main and Short Street, or Main and Vine Street, and the courthouse, or I'm sorry, the History Museum Plaza, Cheapside Park, that will be a much easier project and low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that will have such a major impact on our community. So what I'd like to do is, while I made the motion to change it to an ordinance, I do have grave concerns, and I'm hoping that we can slow this process down a bit to get all the information we need, maybe make it more of an attractive to other bidders because of the timeline and the technical problems and et cetera. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Well, the motion on the floor is to make that modification to the docket for Thursday evening. And we have a second by Councilmember Blue. So the issue on the floor is whether or not to approve the modification to the docket. Any further discussion?
I want to speak to this. I'm sorry.
Vice Mayor. Well,
yeah,
Councilmember
go ahead.
James.
That's fine, yeah.
My question's just for clarification for anybody watching is what's the significance of changing it from an ordinance to a resolution? That's what the modification is, right?
It's because it would require a budget amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Gray.
Is it appropriate to speak to the issues that Councilmember Lawless spoke to now or not?
Well, I guess it goes to the question of whether or not we ought to modify the docket. If there's comments with regard to whether or not we ought to modify the docket, that's germane. If it's, some philosophical discussion about, on the other hand, whether we should or shouldn't be doing streetscapes, that would be better for another time.
Okay, so I think mine's probably specific to this. I'd begin by saying exactly what Councilmember Lawless had to say in terms of the significance of this project and how important it is. My concerns have to do with, similarly, with the significance of this particular piece of the project and its influence on the rest of the project, on the continuing political will that we'll need to have for the rest of the project. And I think Cleet, you're here, you probably want to speak to this. Is that why you're here today, to speak to this at this particular time? Okay. Well, let me make my points first, and then you can tell me if I'm way off base. My understanding is that we received 2 bids, and of the 2...
Point of order, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Feigl, your point?
The issue at hand is whether this is going to be an ordinance or a resolution, is my understanding.
The issue is whether or not to put it on the docket. It can't be a resolution because there's a budget impact.
But your amendment is to change it to an ordinance rather than a resolution. Okay, that's the question on the floor.
And I think that point is well taken. The procedural issue at hand is whether or not to amend the docket. This kind of discussion would be entirely appropriate once we get to the point at which we're debating these particular items on the agenda. All right. Anything further? All right. Those then in favor of amending the docket as reflected in Councilmember Lawless's motion, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. Anything further, Councilmember Lawless?
No, thank you.
Well, I'm having trouble with my machine today. It does not want to stay put, so forgive me, but it looks like Councilmember Myers is next.
Thank you, Mayor. For the council members, I had circulated a motion that I spoke about last week that I said that I'll be bringing forward today. It has to do with the public library being gracious enough to be willing to hire a volunteer coordinator for the Gainesway Community Center. And so we need to get this done so that they can go ahead. They have to have this resolution passed by us so that they can go ahead and hire that person. So it's at no cost to Urban County government. There's a full copy of the resolution or the agreement here. The agreement was written by our law department, so it's been vetted properly. And so I'm going to place on the docket for Thursday night's council meeting a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Board of Trustees of the Lexington Public Library to provide let me finish. I like that, though. To provide a part-time community development coordinator for the Gainesway Community Center for FY 2010 at no cost to Urban County government. So moved.
All right. Councilmember Myers has moved to add that item to the docket. Councilmember Lawless has seconded that motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Blues.
Thank you, Mayor. Please bear with me. I have 4 motions. And the first refers back to the email I sent yesterday along with the proposed ordinance to convert the Corridors Committee to a commission. And therefore, the motion is to place on the docket for the Thursday, July 2, 2009 council meeting an ordinance creating Article 44 in Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinance to establish the Corridors Commission. So moved.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favor of adding that item to the docket, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
The following 2 motions are at the request of the administration. I move to place on the docket for the July 2 council meeting an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor to accept a grant in the amount of $113,154 from the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet to support a one-day household hazardous waste recycling event. Acceptance of the grant obligates the Urban County government for the expenditure of $29,481 as a local match. So moved.
I have a motion and a second by Councilmember Blues. A motion by Councilmember Blues, a second by Councilmember Gordon to add that item to the docket. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Motion number 3, to place on the docket for the July 2 council meeting an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor to accept a grant in the amount of $14,035 from the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet to support a partnership with Lexington Habitat for Humanity to establish a program to collect, bulk, and resell leftover latex-based paint to generate revenue and reduce hazardous landfill-bound waste. Acceptance of the grant obligates the Urban County government for the expenditure of $4,678 as a local match, which will be provided in kind by Lexington Habitat for Humanity. So moved.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries.
And the last motion, at the request of Councilmember McCord, who had to leave for another meeting. I move to place on the docket a resolution authorizing the mayor, on behalf of the Urban County government, to execute a site access agreement with ATC Associates, Inc. and Verizon South, Inc. for access to Shiloh Park for a limited subsurface investigation at no cost to the Urban County government.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
And I have 2 announcements. Monday, July 6th, the Georgetown Street Neighborhood Association will meet at 6 p.m. in the O'Rear Center in Douglas Park, and on the same evening, the Green Acres Hollow Creek Breckenridge Neighborhood Association will meet at 7 p.m. in the Community Center in Green Acres Park. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make a motion here in a moment, but I thought I would explain it before I make it. This is related to Mary Pfister, who is the Director of Accounting and is currently serving as the Senior Advisor for Policy and Budget. That position was abolished by the Council in the budget this year, so she will now be serving as the Director of Accounting and the Acting Director of Budgeting. The reason for the motion is that she's receiving additional compensation for taking on the additional responsibilities until we have a replacement for the position that's open. And so because we've changed the positions, we just have to reauthorize the continuation of the additional compensation. Having explained this, I'm now making the motion. I move to place on the docket for the Thursday, July 2, 2009 council meeting a resolution approving continuation of the 16.77% acting assignment pay for Mary Pfister. Ms. Pfister is the Director of Accounting and was serving as the acting Senior Advisor for Policy and Budget. She is now serving as the Director of Accounting and the acting Director of Budgeting. This increase of greater than 10% is due to market demands and in recognition of the experience, exceptional qualifications of the employee.
Second.
And as I understand this, this is also a continuation. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Lane, second by Councilmember Martin. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Councilmember Lane? Thank you. Councilmember Feigl.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to announce that tonight is the Big Band and Jazz Festival at Ecton Park that begins at 7 o'clock. Bring a picnic basket and a blanket and a chair and enjoy the music. It's free of charge.
Great. Vice Mayor Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pick up on the South Lime. There's no objection to that, is there? Huh? Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you may want to pick it back up then when we're before the vote. My concern on what we need to be thinking about is just hold this in your thoughts. The estimate for the scope that we're bid, the estimate was roughly $9 million, and the bid that's being actively considered that we've just passed the resolution on is $13 million. And this project is being undertaken in an unusual way for a project like this. It's being undertaken on a design-build basis. Design-build is a great method. It's one I'm very familiar with. But for this sort of project, with the uncertainties of this project, it can lead to prices that are unusually, or that reflect the higher risk. So I think we really need to take a page out of the lyric that we've just gone through and step back and look at this carefully at the project and examine the method of engineering and consider continuing with the detail engineering, which is a normal method for a project like this. And then with the more detailed engineering, we'd be able to get more prices on the project. So if you all want to hear from Cleet today or hear from Mike, that's up to you. I'll take, we can catch it later.
All right. There's nothing further. Councilmember Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. We don't walk in lockstep very often, but in this particular case, I think that I agree with Vice Mayor Gray. It might be a good idea to slow down this project slightly, take another look at it. One of the concerns that I have is that the complexity and scope of the work may be to the extent that the job could be delayed, and it would be terrible if we were under construction on this when the games came in. And here again, I'm not an expert on the scope of this, and maybe I need to be briefed more fully on this, but I'm a little concerned about it. And I think that perhaps we could spend this money in a couple other areas downtown and get more going for the games than we could for this project.
Councilmember Beard.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there not a time dependency on this as relates to wintertime? There's a segment of this has to be done by wintertime. And I don't know what you're proposing, Vice Mayor, but as far as slowing things down, but I don't know whether we would want to slow it down to the point where we would be falling on our sword and not get it done by September, October of 2010.
Commissioner Webb can speak to the weather-related issues.
There definitely are weather considerations on concerning this project, and truthfully, that's why we were trying to get this done prior to the council break, trying to get the contract approved to allow that construction to start. The contractor that was selected and we're requesting approval for provided detailed Gantt charts on how the project would proceed, and the intent is to have the underground construction completed by November 15th. That would be the storm sewer, the sanitary sewer, and the duct banks that would take care of the electric and the communication cable that comes up through the corridor. There would be some construction with a water line that we think that would continue, but we would allow for opening at least a lane of limestone until that was completed. That would be completed prior to the end of the year and build out. And during the winter, what would take place is the wiring of the conduit that was installed. Not nearly as weather dependent, not that it can be done in an ice storm by any means or in a snowstorm, but not as dependent on weather as underground construction is and concrete work. The intent was to have that completed and all the properties along the corridor that will get their new services off those underground conduits to be tied in to the new system where a complete conversion can take place, and by March 31st the poles can come down. When the poles come down, then the sidewalk work can begin, the final sidewalk work and the final street work, final curbs, final solid sidewalks, and permanent road base. And the contract that we bid has penalties and bonuses in it. The penalties occur whenever certain targets are not met, and specifically the main specific is opening up the road to through traffic, and then there's bonuses for coming in early.
Hopefully we'll have businesses to hook the telephone lines and electric lines too.
Let me speak to the question I think you were asking about weather conditions. I don't want to be flip about this, but I think that's a red herring. This is a confined area. The base under this has been there for 100, 200 years. You can't find a better project to do in the winter than a project like this. Now, somebody might dispute that, but weather conditions are, I just don't think that's an issue. What I'm concerned about is we've got a 50% difference between what we estimated this project to be and what the bids are.
And I guess what my concern was, during the building of the courthouses, the stretch from Vine Street to Main Street, there was a hole big enough to drop the moon in, and a bunch of idle equipment that sat there for months and months and months through the cold weather. And so I would not want that to happen again.
If I could speak as to the South Lime, that was one of the things we have been working on this with the utilities, keeping them. We've had monthly meetings. We're having bi-weekly meetings as we've gotten closer to the potential for the project to start. During our discussions, one of the things that we discussed were the long holdups and the issues on the North Line piece, which is much shorter than this. One of the issues, one of the things that added a lot of length of time to that was the fact that each utility, the government hired an excavator to excavate a ditch. And then each utility came in one by one and put their conduit in. All that takes scheduling time to get a contractor from the job they're doing, come over, lay your conduit. I know it seems like a simple thing, but they're really like government. They don't keep people on the shelf just to go do your job. They have to be scheduled in, queued out. And the coordination to get the conduit in took a long time. Once it was all backfilled and ready, then each utility came in one by one and wired up their conduit. We we discussed those issues with the group of overhead utilities. How can we get past this one conduit at a time? And what the answer we were given, or what I think we came up to it as a group, what the answer is that rather than have an excavator dig a ditch that stays open while we try to schedule all these different contractors in there, we would have one contractor do all the conduit work. And since we were doing a contract for the corridor, we included the conduit in our contract. So when the ditch goes up there, whatever conduit is needed goes in at one time. Nobody has to wait, and the ditch can be backfilled.
Councilmember Lawless.
First of all, I want to compliment Commissioner Webb and Cleet and the folks that from the contract company. I met with them, and they've worked hard. Again, I don't see and I don't have a problem with it being done in a coordinated fashion that it expedites it. But without knowing a lot of things that we don't know, I can't imagine the weather is going to be that much of a deterrent between, say, November 15th and January 1st. You know, we rarely have a white Christmas. So that being said, I think there's just too many unknowns, and what other projects are going to be going on, what other streets are going to be closed. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Gorton.
I just have a quick question, which is probably for Charlie Martin, but you might know it just for my satisfaction. If this project is delayed, is there any consent decree deadline that's impacted by the sewer work? No? Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further council member wish to report?
I just want to summarize so it's clear what it is that I've been talking about. We're talking about the procurement method here. The difference between completing design engineering so that the scope is clear and bidders bid on that scope. That is not what we have done in this project. That is highly unusual in this sort of work. And as a result, my hypothesis is that the bids are higher. It's no fault to anybody's. It's just that's the nature of a project like this where the scope is not defined, it's not clear, then the risk is greater and the bids are going to be higher. And the likelihood of changes is higher as well. And my suggestion is that we take a page out of what we just did with the Lyric, step back, examine the process, ask whether or not we can spend the money to finish the engineering, the detailed engineering, and then bid the project again and get prices that would more than likely, at least in my view, be lower, save us money. Okay? Thank you.
Councilmember Lane, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just had a couple for you, Commissioner Webb. One of the questions I have is it difficult to determine the scope of the work because you're going to have to dig this up to see what's under there to determine it, or do you know exactly where all the utility lines are and everything?
Whenever you're talking about replacement work, as it compares to greenfield work, it always comes with a risk, because that road was built how many years ago? I mean, that road has been here for a long time. There can be fire cisterns in it. There will be old utilities that we don't know where they are. We're going to encounter those. It's the same for any time that you dig into a street that's been there for a long time. You might think of it as prior to mapping, when things were mapped that were underground. You're going to run into a lot of unknowns. And there is an unknown with the rock. The one thing that I would say is you can limit those unknowns by doing additional work. We could do additional rock sounding. You could get a better feel for how much rock is out there. You could do additional engineering work that we have put in the contract for the general contractor for this project, and you may be able to save a certain amount of money. What that amount is, I don't know. I believe that when you ask for a good product, and that's what we ask for, a good product done in a quick manner, a manner that the city is not accustomed to doing that work in. When you ask for that, you're going to get a higher price for that. We're going to get this price, the sewer replacement, the conduit. It would be more expensive in this spot than it would be on Southview Drive, just because of the age and the uncertainty and the issues that go with this. I believe that it is the proper process. I do have concerns for the folks on in that corridor, and I believe that trying to get this done in a relatively quick amount of time, and for them it won't be quick, but for a project that has this much construction on it, it would be quick. A relatively quick amount of time is the best we can do for them. You can do a lot of engineering work, you can do a lot of study, and you can stage the construction, and you can do it over a period of time, and what you have is one that comes very close to budget, one that has a very good final project, and one that's done over a long period of time. I think of a great example is Loudon Avenue. You know, there was a lot of utility work done there. It was done one utility at a time. 4 years, I didn't work here when that started. I was just worked here when it was ended. It caused a lot of issues for those folks. And that's one thing that we really did consider was what's the best for these folks in that corridor, and selecting when to start. We wanted to get as much work out of the way before UK got their students back in there. That will add a lot of confusion to that corridor, and that's really when those businesses become the most active, I believe. And we felt it was a big benefit to start this job as quickly as we could, to take advantage of the construction season. With all of those Phase 1 projects, as the project manager on those and part of the team, we have always felt that whenever we were given design money for those projects, and every time we've been in discussions, that it was intended that we provide an opportunity to get these projects done by July 1. That was the date that was always given. And we looked at all those different things as we worked through this project with the utilities to try to come up with the best package we could to allow what we thought we were hearing from council.
Well, you're talking about $4 million over your estimated cost.
Mm-hmm.
Did that surprise you when the bid came in, or?
I thought it did not surprise me to a great deal on the utility package piece of it. It was my feeling that it was underestimated from the very beginning. Those estimates were based on some information from KU. Each of these utilities have been very upfront about saying that difficult for us to give you a price because we don't do this type of work. This is not our bread and butter.
Do you feel that you can timely complete it? I mean, we've got 450 days before the World Games. Do you think you'll be buttoned up, or do you foresee, stuff like you got to get an easement, somebody won't give it to you, and you got to take legal proceedings and all that? Do you see any issues like that out there?
In my opinion, the largest risk factor, there's two big risk factors to being done, in my opinion, and believe me, it's my opinion. I would ask you to ask anyone about this, is weather. We can't control the weather. We have penalties built in, and I think we have higher prices because we have a very defined timeline to get this done. We have penalties built in, but if we get weather that you can't do construction work in, that does not count against the contract. Right. We have to be reasonable. So that is a risk. We cannot hold weather that you can't do construction again in against them. My other concern is the final connections of the property owners so that the poles can come down. I believe we have a commitment from the utilities. We don't have a signed contract on their wire up yet. We have working estimates, but I believe those are the two things. And I believe we can manage the hookup of the utilities, but that we can't control the weather.
All right. This is my last question. Would you strongly recommend to the council that we go forward with this time, or do you feel that we ought to delay the project? What's your recommendation?
I think we have a contractor that can perform the work and get it done for us. I think they understood the job. They did a good job of preparing. I believe that there is risk in escalation of price, and I can show you areas where I think that may be in. I think there's some risks there. I believe it comes down to a matter of how important is this to the council, to the community, and to get this project done. There's no way I can predict without going out and bidding each of those engineering pieces and seeing what the difference is, and working through that. If it's a matter of cost savings for you, you would have to do that. You'd have to bid out every piece and do a comparison and estimate the time and all the other expenses that go along with the timeline to do that. And I have not looked at it that way.
Taking care of the property owners. We can't close their business down for months after month after month. We need to be sensitive to their requirements to be.
I understand that. And if you did a Loudoun Avenue project, what you would do is you'd be impacting them during the construction season over a much longer period of time. Believe me, I do have concerns for the folks who have businesses and who own property on that corridor. And I believe that what we sat and heard from the contractor, we asked for a plan that would give access to sidewalks. And they were very honest in the meeting. They said, we cannot guarantee 100% access because there's construction will be on the sidewalks. What we will commit to is scheduling work with each one of those businesses along there. I don't often share my feelings on certain items with the council, but I would like to about supporting those businesses. The government has to do projects in front of businesses on a continuing basis. And I know there has been people who have asked, well, can we pay a part of the, if they can identify losses or whatever. We do projects all the time. This is significant because it's in a very busy corridor. There's a lot of small businesses there, and we're going to be in front of them. We're going to try to impact them for the shortest amount of time. Doing anything like that would create risk anywhere else. But I believe from the support I've seen from stakeholders, from the council for this, that if folks want to see these type of projects done, then they have to step up and they have to help support those businesses. I think it's all of our responsibility to go up there and have dinner and stop into those shops, frequent those shops during the project. We've talked about getting advertisement out on a website dedicated just to the South Lime project. But I truly believe, and I apologize for throwing my opinion out there, but that's what it is. If you want these types of projects, we can't pay people to redo the road and the sewer in front of them, but we can get together as a community and support these folks while we do it for the shortest period of time that we can make the project happen in. Sorry for editorializing.
Well, thank you for your candor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything further? Councilmember Lawless.
Again, I want to say that The people I've worked with on this have been really great, Commissioner Webb. And I really appreciate your plug for those businesses because it is going to hurt. And I fully support the streetscape projects. I fully support doing this as quickly and painlessly as possible. And I think a lot of this is about doing that. Do you have any concerns about what other street projects will be going on at the same time and what other street closures might be going on at the same time and that gridlock?
And I did get a note from you earlier today. We have a master list, but I thought, and we also had a staff meeting, and I asked Marwan to get together what he felt the significant ones were. There are some projects going on that are not LFUCG projects. Right. UK has a bridge project for the hospital, and what I wanted to do, and if it would be okay, I could bring that back Thursday, and we can take a look at that. There's one thing I would say is this not a typical year in Lexington? There's a lot of construction goes on here all the time. I don't know that there is ever going to be really a good time because you can't shut private projects down. And I think we're going to manage better, but there's always going to be a lot of projects. And if we do this, it'll be hard to get downtown. There'll be a Newtown Pike project. It'll be hard to get in from the north. We'll certainly look at what else is going on and make that available to you. I think all that plays in. And we can also kind of put together what our estimates are for the rest of the streetscape projects.
Will this slow down or keep Main and Vine and Cheapside and the Pavilion from getting done? Are we choosing between Main, Vine, and Cheapside Pavilion?
I think what would be the best thing for me to do is bring back a spreadsheet that we've worked off of that shows the estimates of what those would cost and present those to you. I understood from the beginning that would be a part of the entire picture for the council since all the projects were phase one. We did just get a grant. We have not received the letter, but at the meeting they said we were approved for a KIA loan, low interest loan with 50% forgiveness for the streetscape project. Commissioner Taylor has checked. We didn't think we could use it for the sewers on South Lime, the storm sewer, but she has checked, and we now believe that money, although it was for the whole entire project, could go to the green infrastructure and the sewer on South Lime. So we're trying to do some final checking.
Okay, I'd really appreciate on Thursday if you could let us know what the schedule is for Main, Vine, Cheapside, and the Pavilion.
And what we'll give you is the cost estimates too, and we'll look at the money packages.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any further reports from the council? All right. Contrary to the indication on the agenda, there is no mayor's report today. The only other person I had who had signed up to speak was Ms. Hannah, and I believe she has already left. Does anyone else wish to address the council? All right. Mr.
Mayor, excuse me, we had scheduled a closed session that needs to be deferred. Mr. Wright needed to be here, and he's been called away to a special called meeting of the Health Board.
I'm sure that breaks everyone's heart, but...
Excuse me, the Housing Authority, not the Health Board. Yeah.
All right. Do I hear a motion we adjourn? I'm sorry. I apologize. Mr. Cobb wished to speak. So before we get away from public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. First, giving honor to the Most High. I feel like Howard Cosell today when he stood up for Muhammad Ali. He said, I do what is right. What is right may not always be popular. What is popular may not always be right. So out of respect to the mayor, the council, Andrea, I apologize for the words I said last week, the tone I said it in. After talking to Ms. Lawless, Councilman Lawless, she pointed out that that was my personal opinion, and I'm be the bigger man today. Anybody that was offended by my comments last week, I do apologize. but we still got work to do. I still have a righteous indignation. I still need your help. We're talking about the lyric, and it's yet to be constructed, but I want to see the manifestation of unity before we build the building. Just because we construct the building is not going to cure the wounds in our community. We have nothing, Mayor. We don't have nothing exclusively black in the city, and that's the brunt of my frustration. Y'all have Hamburg, Transylvania, downtown, Southside, Tuskegee, Heartland. Just put things into perspective. Peace.
Thank you. Now do I hear a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Stinnett has moved we adjourn. Councilmember Myers has seconded the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.